Welcome, everybody, to the Good Times Hour. All right, Paul, take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, please welcome our next very special guest of the tea. He's the MVP who is the LLC, here to brand the backhand and forehand all across the land. The trusty pistol packing sidearm gunner stacking wins and Benjamins, racking up the record-breaking action with eyes a twinkle and a happy grin. He's one of the original Gophertown boys, the junior OG, long of shank and flexy to the max, at elbow and knee, with any and every Frisbee toy. He's the world's undisputed dominator of distance, a king among princes blown hither and yon on the winds of chance. He's Jack the Ripper, the heavy disc gripper and world-wandering day tripper, with the eagle wingspan and long bomb game plan. He's on the run and maxing out the fun, living his best life free from mental and spiritual strife. Paralysis by perfection was never a confection of this player's soul. It's always eyes on the prize despite the humps and bumps on life's road. Adjust your specs and you're set while this cat makes his epic flex. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the tea, Scott Stokely.
Oh my God. Look, I don't know how to put this, and I'm sure this will offend some people because I'm really only attracted to women, but I got the hots for you right now. I'm saying. I'm also going to tell you that my neck is going to hurt so bad tomorrow because of how fat this head is right now. Oh my God. No, seriously, that was really that was beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm honored that you took the time to put that together for me. Thank you.
It's I do that for the Toronto Island Maple Leaf as a tea time tournament here on the island in Toronto. And yeah. I do that for a much more truncated version of that for all the players. And so I love doing the deep dive. I love doing the research. And you, my friend, you have a deep pool to research. You were an inveterate social media presenter, an amazing, charismatic person. And before we get any further, we just have a little framework we want to, for anybody who may not be familiar out there with who Scott Stokely is, tee it up for him, Mace.
So I actually didn't even know this, but you're originally from Justin, Texas?
No. That is where I get my mail while we travel the world.
I was like, what? Because we haven't known this.
No, we haven't
known this by now.
That we travel full time. We will never have a home the rest of our lives. We just live on the road. We just travel, but you have to have a place where your driver's license gets sent to. So sure. It's our legal residence, but we haven't been there in many years.
That's interesting. Well, so you're currently, I don't know how to pronounce this properly. Is it Jamala, Finland?
Yeah, it's the Åland Islands. That's the city, but really, it's the Åland Islands is made up of, it's hundreds of islands off the coast of Finland. Okay. And this is the island that made a lot of press because 2 years ago they didn't have disc golf, and now this island has 18 courses.
Wow.
So it's I should say island. I think a couple of the nearby islands have courses. I'm sure you know this, but maybe not all the listeners know this, but Finland is the most insane place in the world to disc golf right now. Here's how I'll best describe it, because there's 5.5 million people in Finland, so it's a smaller population. But if Denver, Colorado had the same number of courses per capita that Finland does, there would be almost 1,000 courses in Denver.
Wow. That's something else.
That is, they're huge on hockey. Now they're big on disc golf. They finally found the summer sport.
Disc golf is the number one most played activity. After school. Something like 55%, either 45 or 55% of kids disc golf after school as their number one activity. Oh, wow. It is insane. It's insane. It's the national sport of Finland. It's insane out here.
Now, is so much of that a result of UC Maresma?
Yes, very much so.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's always, it takes a village. So UC was definitely very much involved in it.
But it takes a pioneer to lay the first sod.
Yeah, Seppo was, it starts off with Nieneman, Fred Nieneman. No, oh my God, I'm trying to place last name's Nieneman. I'm so sorry, but that was the first player who put the first course in, like in like the early '80s.
Wow.
But so what's happened is it's because it's been adopted as such a popular sport. If you have a park, you want a course. If you have open space, you want a course. So now it's just it it takes on a life of its own after the seeds are planted, and Finland has just knocked it out of the park. It's crazy here.
Nice.
Everyone plays. I go into a restaurant and I get recognized every single restaurant I go into in Finland, not by people who are there for the tournament, but just by people who are disc golfers that see me on TV.
Wow.
TV meaning YouTube, right? But or the Disc Golf Network. Yeah, it's it's bizarre. It's really great.
That's cool, man. That's really interesting. So your PDGA number is 3140. You've been a pro since 1985. What prompted you to get your number? This is one thing we always ask people. A lot of times it's an amateur world championship or a world championship or something. So what was the catalyst for you to get your PDGA number?
Honestly, I mean, first off, it was so long ago. I think it was just something that you did because it was kind of like being part of the club.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because back then you could always get like, people would actually consider back then. So back in the early days of the sport, it was definitely, it was very counterculture. And, a lot of people that played weren't part of mainstream society. With that came a lot of people maybe without a lot of money. So there were many players who said, oh, it's $50 to join the PDGA, but it's only a $10 temporary membership if I don't have a PDGA number. I'm only playing 3 tournaments this year. I'm not going to get a number.
Somebody actually the other day we had on said it was only $1, which, I mean, that was way before my time. I mean, I remember it was like 5.
No, that must have been way back at the beginning. But yeah, so I think that joining wasn't so mandatory back then, but you just joined because that's kind of what you did.
Because all your friends did.
Because it's part of the club. Everybody has a story about how they could have gotten a number. Everybody, I could have gotten a lower number if I bought earlier. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I could have too. But...
Snap Conger told me in Flagstaff he's number 60, and he told me the same thing. And I just laughed and I go, dude, everybody that comes on the show says that same thing. If I'd have done it when my friends did it or whatever, but he goes, I was broke and Ed wouldn't float me. So I got 60. And I was like, he goes, I could have been way lower. And I was just like, so we'll have him on during USCGC week. And so we'll get the rest of that story there. But that's definitely a recurring theme that we've definitely done.
John Kirkland, I think, has the best story because and I believe this is the case, is that John Kirkland was going to be the 4th number. It was Ed Hendricks, Victor Malafronte, and Dan Stork-Roddick. And John Kirkland was going to be the 4th member for this new organization. But his IFA, his International Frisbee Association number was 100. So he just asked Ed, hey, can I just have number 100?
Oh, wow.
And so he got number 100. A nice clean number, but it was, I'm sure if he could go back in time, he would have traded it for number 4.
Right. Interesting.
I love it.
Interesting. So you've played 270 career events, which is hard to believe that it's that low a number, because I know you've been playing forever and ever, even with the break. You've got 90 career wins. You got $93,207.35 in career earnings. Your global masters rank is number 2, and you have 17 world and national professional titles before leaving the sport in 2000. That's a fair bit of info right there.
Yeah. So first off, the number of tournaments is it is kind of lower. But yeah, I did not play from 2001 to 2014. So I took a 13-year gap, which would have been another 253, 400 tournaments, something like that. But before then, there weren't that many tournaments. Yeah.
I guess I failed to take that into consideration, but I mean,
yeah, in the early days, I mean, if you were just playing, I mean, now Texas, so your frame of reference might be a little bit different because Texas, had I had a lot of tournaments, but it could be a 13-hour drive and you're still in Texas, right? So
It's true. Very true.
So a normal state might be the Dallas Fort Worth area up to Amarillo would be like a normal state. And so there just weren't that many events. So what I would do is I would travel and go to tournaments, but there, in the winter there was, a tournament every 2 months within range. And I also, one thing, I also opted to move to Colorado, which basically at the time ruled out winter tournaments. So for 6 months, there were no tournaments because there was only 5 tournaments a year in the state. You're not going to run it in December.
Right.
So maybe
not going to run it when half the state's covered in feet of snow.
Yeah.
So you at one point in time, you had the distance, backhand, and forehand record at the same time.
Yeah.
Actually, not quite. There wasn't really an established sidearm record, although we all knew what it was. So it was a record. All the players knew it. But if you remember back then, like almost nobody threw sidearm. And by almost nobody, I mean I was the only touring player that threw sidearm interchangeably. So I set the record in 95. I broke my record in 98. And then I believe in 2000 is when Chris Vogt from Germany broke my record. And basically what happened was that this is when, at the time, I was having some back trouble. So like I wasn't going to break my record then. I was not throwing as far enough to break the record. And so we were out at the distance tournament, and I believe we had 3 sets, 5 throws each. And he broke my record. And when it got to my last turn, I had 5 throws, and there was no chance that I was going to break the record he just set. It was, he had passed me, and I wasn't healthy as well. And so I got 5 throws left. I go, well, maybe I'll just set the sidearm record just so I can still have a record. And then so I threw a 560. So I threw the sidearm record. So I never held him at the same time by about an hour. But I set the sidearm record at 568 with a speed 7 disc, which is not too shabby.
Well, that's the other thing, is that you were
What?
hissing bombs out there with speed 7 and 6 discs. That's, people can't even comprehend that they're going double the speed profile now or more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's borderline a mid-range disc. Here's the thing about the sidearm record, and because I am the only person to hold both backhand and sidearm records. But the thing about the sidearm record is that was never the maximum peak of human ability. Like my backhand record, based on the discs, holds up with any player playing today. I mean, I can do the math on the discs. There's players, people like David Wiggins. I wouldn't say I threw farther than him, but he doesn't throw farther than me. We were at the peak of what maybe a body could do backhand or close to it. My sidearm record was never near the peak, because I know that when I threw a baseball, I was not breaking 90 miles an hour with a baseball. Yet there's people throwing baseballs 105 miles an hour at the peak of their sport, which means my sidearm record, as impressive as I feel it is nowhere near what somebody is physically capable of throwing a sidearm. It was just nobody else threw it then. So I'm proud of it, but I'm that pride is tempered with there's people out there that could demolish it. But the backhand record, I think, backhand record still holds up.
Yeah. Especially considering, like, if you were to do the, those kind of, when they say they made this much money, but with inflation, it's adjusted to this. You would this profile, but with speed profile inflation, what I mean?
Well, here's what I said in my book, and this is what I believe. If you asked me, you said, who throws farther? Me, Chris Vogt, Chris Sandstrom, Simon Lizotte, David Wiggins, like who throws farther? My answer is absolutely positively it's me. I would beat all of them. However, if you ask Simon the same question, I would be disappointed if he did not tell you the exact same thing. And I don't mean me. like Simon should also say, that's great, Scott, but I throw farther than you. And David Wiggins should say, you guys are, I look up to you guys so much, but you can't beat me. So I think I'm the best, but of course they should feel the same way. It's a humble arrogance. How about that?
I like that.
Oh yeah, well, and yeah, that sounds good. That sounds really good.
I'll dodge the bullet there, and I'll be arrogant in a way that's adorable.
So we got a couple more things to cover here, and then we'll go on to some questions. But you have multiple Guinness Book World Records. Is that correct? What are
Yeah.
they? Do you know?
Oh, I had the longest backhand in 1995, or longest throw of a flying disc, and then I broke it in 1998. Then the sidearm record. I also set some records, like the longest field goal record, which I don't know what that was, and oh God, I broke the longest basketball record in practice. But I mean, those are just silly records. So I would say those 3 records are the ones that are they're the real records. It's like my 17 world titles. I actually have a world title, world mini indoor guts champion. I don't count that with my 17 titles. I mean, that's it. It's not a world title. It's that was at October.
Did that come from?
Right?
I was going to say, did that come from the Frizz?
It was an October
cool.
Frizz. Yes, yeah. So technically, it's a world title, but come on, it's obviously not.
What about the
Frizz world
fastest
title.
throw? You still have that?
Oh, okay. So yeah. So I also have a world record for the fastest throw, which I did on ESPN, which was really neat. ESPN came out and they did a gut speed catch record, and I threw. So yeah, I had the world's fastest throw as well. Interestingly enough, as Simon threw, to the best of my knowledge, he threw within 2 miles an hour. He was 2 miles an hour shy of my throw. That's how close Simon was to throwing as hard as me.
Wow.
With a golf weight disc like I did. But then Simon got smart and he threw like a 90-gram AVR or something like that, 4 miles an hour faster, which, you know, to his credit, that's how you break records. You figure out how to break them. So yeah, I got no problem with that. And the thing about the speed record too is that when you're shooting with a radar gun, whether or not the disc is flying right at the gun or off, they are not an accurate measure. Shooting at distance with a laser is damn accurate, but the radar guns are fairly inaccurate. But I think really what it shows is when you compare this to the players of today, they have sensors they can put on discs, and basically no one's throwing harder than I did, but there are people that are throwing as hard. So we're all in the ballpark. And by the way, this is no different in like in baseball. You got your best fastball pitchers. Well, there's a whole bunch of people within a mile or to an hour of each other, and there's half the league is within 5 or 6 miles per hour. So I think there's a limit to what a body can do, and there's not going to be the outliers. In the early days of sport, I was an outlier, but that's because our sport was small. But now that we're so big with so many real athletes today, like I think we're about where it's going to go. I think.
So you don't think so? Okay, so I remember. You probably remember this, but I helped you one time in Kansas City at an amateur world championship, and you set up a net with a speed gun, and a guy did a grip lock and hit you across the chest. You remember that time?
Yeah, it's still black and blue.
And so, yeah, like it went across your chest and your bicep. But so I remember, if I remember correctly, most everybody was topping out at 72, and at the time you were topping out at 82 on that particular speed gun. So what got you the extra 10 from there? And do you think so? I think what you just answered the question besides that was, do you think that it's going to go past 92?
No, I mean, I think that's probably pretty close. I mean, that's probably the 100-mile-per-hour fastball that they are now throwing faster than. I mean, there's people that throw faster than Nolan Ryan now.
Yeah, for sure.
But no one's going to ever throw a baseball 115. Like, you know, you can plot a curve, and that curve starts to level off. And so, as far as what flew further, I'm not sure, but that's every world record is an outlier. You know, so I've thrown many throws in distance competitions. A lot of them had really good angle, and they didn't set world records. So whatever that thing is that comes together, you know, it came together.
All right. Well, we're going to touch on distance again in a little bit when we talk about rivalries. But the last few things I'm going to throw out here from your framework is you you have you've kind of stepped out again with your Blue Power adaptive disc golf, and I think that's really cool. I think some of that started from a lady you met here in town, correct?
I didn't meet her. I didn't meet her in town, but I did meet her back when I came back to the sport in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I met a woman whose son had autism, and what I saw an individual who was a good, loving parent who had to deal with something that, had I not seen it, I would not be aware of. Like, I mean, we're obviously aware that people with special needs and autism or Down syndrome or any other type of disability exist, but until you're exposed to it, you don't really see what that's like. And I saw what that was like in her, with her and her family. And so I started doing things for the special needs community. I started running events, teaching disc golf classes. And the relationship with her didn't work out, but I had, by the time it didn't work out, I had found something that I was passionate about, which is supporting people, and by people mostly families, in the special needs community. And I have since this point, I just did my 286th throwing clinic, and I did it in Inverness, Scotland, at a school for kids with special needs, where I show up and I teach disc golf to those students. And like, my classes are obviously always free. For about, God, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the classes I was donating a disc and a shirt to every kid that came out. I stopped doing that because I don't take donations. If you offer to donate money right now, I would tell you to donate to a local organization. I don't deal with the money. So I was paying for all this out of pocket, which got to be a little bit overwhelming. I just kept trying to do more and more. And next thing you know, I was like, oh my God, I don't have gas to get to the next event because I'm giving away. Anyways, so I stopped giving away the disc, but I still do the classes for free. And it's something I'm as proud of as anything I've done in the sport.
That's outstanding. So the last few things are the Stokely disc golf method. You're also an author, social media star, entrepreneur, and barbecue sauce specialist.
You forgot handsome, but that's okay. I'll cut you some slack.
Well, we might get to that. We might get to that in a little bit.
That was definitely inferred.
Okay.
So we're just gonna. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Yeah. So I got my hands in a lot of different things. Here's what I do. I call it my disc golf mutual fund. Basically, I invest in invest money or time into a lot of different ventures in the disc golf world, because I want the security of having a mutual fund over putting all my eggs into one stock, hoping that company goes big. Because as long as disc golf does well, as long as I'm diversified, I'll do well. So things like my teaching, like I have an online class called Become a Complete Disc Golfer. It's the thing I'm most proud of in my teaching, has been wildly successful, not just for me financially, but all the students think it's they're all better at disc golf now. It's what they paid for. Right. But at the same time, I also, I have not sold a lot of barbecue sauce. In fact, this is God's honest truth. This was the conversation I had with Adriana. Adriana, yell if I'm making this up. I said to her these words. I said, "Hey, by the way, just a heads up. I just bought $20,000 worth of barbecue sauce." Anyways, yeah, no, it's and the follow-up to that story is if in fact you happen to be looking for $19,000 worth of barbecue sauce, please, I can help you out. But if you put the barbecue business and the teaching business together, I'm successful. It's a mutual fund. Not every stock did well, Turns out people don't want to buy $10 bottle barbecue sauce just because my face is on it. Who knew?
Well,
I only found out about it today, so I'm definitely going to be ordering a couple online.
They're delicious, but it's just they're apparently when you buy $20,000 worth of barbecue sauce, that's nothing as far as trying to get a price point that works. You need like it needs to be like way more than that. So even though it's a lot of money to me, that's a very small order when trying to get price. And turns out I couldn't get a price that worked. So the sauce is good, but and it's available at scottstokely.net. I mean, it's delicious. It's all natural, no high fructose corn syrup. It's delicious. But yeah, wasn't my best business decision.
that's. I mean, it takes all those. I think some of that experience that isn't positive goes a lot further than some of the positive experience too. I mean,
Absolutely.
I've put my best foot forward a few times and got hit on the toe with a 5-pound hammer, sometimes a 10-pound hammer.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we got into it was just we've got a kind of a structure to this interview with you, and a lot of it draws its inspiration from your wonderful book. By the way, I read it and I found it fascinating.
Thank you.
Really
thank you so
compelling.
much.
And I really like the phrase "growing up disc golf." It's really ambiguous enough to invite multiple interpretations. And so the three interpretations that I've come up with to frame this interview are: the first part, literally you growing up on the course, from grade, or I guess from 6 years old on, you grew up physically with the game. The second part, well, I think it was in a book review, maybe it was in the fly jacket, saying you had to grow up in order to play disc golf at a professional level and in order to step into that professional mode. And so we want to talk about the failures, the experiments, the learning and success. A lot of the phrases I've taken from your Instagram anyways, but that's one of the things that fits in the hot sauces fits in as well with the fly high, and we can talk about. And the third is literally, you've grown the sport of disc golf. You are not one of the pioneers who planted the first trees, but certainly among the monkeys who planted the first branches. And you've done amazing things with making the sport from an obscure phenomenon to a global phenomenon, an obscure sport to that. So that's kind of the structure we want to go into. But before we do, we just have 20 questions for you. We're going to rapid fire the matchup.
All right.
Okay. So I know you're an intelligent, thoughtful, sophisticated individual. Say you're going to a deserted island. What 3 books do you take with you?
3 books I take with me to. Well, if it's cold, I would probably want a really big book so I could burn. No, I'm just kidding. So probably number 1 is Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. It's my favorite book of all time. It's a book from 1967, sci-fi book, but it's called Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Could not endorse it anymore. I would bring, oh my God, that's it. For fun, I would probably bring Ender's Game.
Right.
I'm a big, huge fan of Ender. And God, probably anything by Malcolm Gladwell. I love socioeconomics. So to me, he's the best storyteller in the world. I prefer to listen to his lectures because he's brilliant, but something like maybe Outliers or something like that, or Tipping Point.
Nice.
All right, what 3 films?
What 3 films? Oh God, the 3 greatest films of all time. First off, it's Willy Wonka.
Okay.
Absolutely. And don't even I will turn this phone off if you even mention Johnny Depp or Tim Burton. I'm still pissed off about that. I would say Willy Wonka, Princess Bride, and Pulp Fiction.
Nice. I'd put Pulp Fiction in there for sure too.
Princess Bride for sure. Okay. Yeah. You've done some massive degree of global traveling. What's your favorite disc golf travel destination?
My favorite disc golf travel destination. It'll take a minute because I gotta give you a little backstory in this. But I loved golfing in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and this is the thing that it's just look, everywhere I've traveled. This is our 26th country since October, so everywhere is special and has special things. But the course out there, it's the first course in Cambodia. So look up Cambodia disc golf. You'll find the one I'm talking about. The person that runs the course it's a beautiful 18-hole course, not a championship level course, but a par 54 course. But it goes around trees and there's rice paddies, obese. It looks just like a film on Vietnam when you look at the fields, the rice paddies, and you picture the people leaning over at the waist, planting rice. That's what it looks like. It looks like Cambodia or Vietnam. What it is, Cambodia. But it's a good course, right? And so I asked the guy that owns the course. I said, how much land do you own? Because it's a big course, And he goes, oh, about a half an acre. And I'm like, well, wait, what are you talking about? Like, well, whose land is the course on? And he says, oh, all of the neighbors. I said, what do you mean all the neighbors? He goes, yeah, we're probably on 10 different neighbors' property to build the course. And I said, they were okay with that? And he says, oh, I never asked them. And I'm like, wait a second, this is not making any sense to me. What do you mean you never asked them? Well, his wife is Cambodian, and it's not even something you ask. You respectfully don't put the basket in the rice paddy where they're trying to raise their food to live, but people want you to use the land. If the land's not being used, they are happy that you're using it. So not only does he not have to ask permission, he can build this 18-hole course on all these people's properties, and when you go out to play, they come to the fence and cheer you on. It's this beautiful sense of community. It is. And by the way, before any of the listeners get a misunderstanding, I believe in capitalism and I believe in the free market. I'm not suggesting that we'd all be happy if we lived in this giant utopian commune. I believe in certain things, but watching it actually work is a different story. When it actually works, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And by the way, every one of these houses, 3 or 4 generations live in a house, which means there's 3, 4, 6 kids in each house. So the golf course is just filled with kids playing, kids walking around, and they're playing in the rice paddies. The water pools up, and they're just running around swimming. I mean, it's so unique. Wow. It's special. So I don't know if it's
awesome.
Too long of an answer for 20 questions, but yeah,
no, that's beautiful. That's a great story.
It is really neat.
It was a great answer as well. So this is maybe easy and it may not be. What's your favorite tournament?
Oh God, favorite tournament. I mean, I would have to say probably the World Championships. Even though I'm not going this year, that is where you crown the best in the world. As far as fun, it's a different type of fun, but definitely. There's nothing compared to the World Championships, because I do believe, ask me who the best player in the world is, and my answer is, well, it's Paul McBeth, of course. Why do I say that? Gannon, Calvin are playing so well. He's the world champion. To me, when you win the World Championships, you get to be you're the best in the world for the next 12 months until someone takes your title from you. You cannot take. I don't care if you're a 7th seed in the NBA, you win the title, you're the best. And so there's something about that, being the best in the very world, that is just so, just as a fan of the sport, means the most to me. So I would say Worlds.
Okay, so a couple of non-tournament questions thrown at you.
Okay.
European travel destination.
Best European travel destination? Oh, it's got to be the fjords of Norway, which, by the way, is a destination. It's where the PCS tournament is, but there's nothing like it other than Milford Sound in the New Zealand, which we were at back in December. So I wouldn't say it's better than Milford Sound, but it is as good as. It's just, you have to see it. I mean, imagine just being on a movie set. You're standing there looking around and you're basically convinced this is CGI. It can't possibly be real. I also, for me, it's outdoor. Look, if you told me that going to certain areas of Amsterdam were your favorite place. Like I wouldn't argue with you because that, there are people like different things, but to me, the outdoors, that's my happy spot.
That's really cool. I like that perspective. Okay, so same question for travel destination in the United States.
Oh, so for me, it's easy. It's southern Utah. You've got Arches National Park,
I just went to Zion.
Canyonlands. Yeah, Zion, Capitol Reef, and Bryce Canyon. But the thing about these 5 national parks in southern Utah is when you are between the national parks, it's just as nice as the national parks. These aren't like little oases, oasi. I'm not sure. Plural for oasis. These are not a bunch of oases in the middle of like ugly. All of southern Utah is beautiful. So it's a thing for me. Like this would surprise a lot of people because I'm basically a professional extrovert. I built my brand on being an extrovert. I do enjoy the attention, and I'm not saying that I don't enjoy it, but my happy place is being out in the backcountry, me and Adriana, where we either hike in or we bike in or we jeep in, and we don't see any other people for days. Even we've gone out more than a week where we've just disappeared, and we've done it all over southern Utah where we've hiked in or canoed in some cases into the middle of the backcountry desert, and that is where I am honestly truly happiest. I can't make a living out there. So I'm not, I need to, balance it with where I fund my trips to the backcountry.
Don't ever underestimate your ability to work the English language, because canoeing to the backcountry desert is the greatest visual in my mind ever.
Okay, if you go to my YouTube channel and search for Scott Stokely Canyonlands National Park. I'll give you the 30-second elevator pitch. This is the greatest trip you will ever take in the U.S. There is a stretch of river. It's 110 miles. About the second half is to Canyonlands National Park, but the first half looks just like Canyonlands National Park. 110-mile stretch. The only way in or out of the river is at the beginning, the end, or one place in the middle. That's it. I mean, there's a couple little weird Jeep roads, whatever, but basically you got 2 55-mile stretches where you won't see a single person fishing on the side of the road. Motorboats are illegal. You can go days without seeing another human being, and it's all flat water. No campgrounds, right? So you get in a canoe, and I laid this out on this video. You get in a canoe and you float about 10 miles in about 2-mile-an-hour water. So it takes you 3 to 5 hours if you paddle or not. And where you camp is you look for a sandbar or a piece of some piece of flat ground, and you just basically pull the canoe up or paddle into a box canyon. If you don't see a canoe like in this box canyon, that entire canyon, for as far as it goes, belongs to you, because there's no way in the canyon other than from the water. Which means you can disappear into these canyons. It's clothing optional. There's no one there to police how you choose to live your life. That's your canyon, and you can be there multiple days and not see a person. It's the greatest experience. I've done it 4 times now, and if I come back to the US, I'll do it again. It's my favorite place in the world.
How long does it take to run that full 110 miles?
Depending on the water level, it's usually 5 days to do half the stretch. But I've done the whole thing in 7 days when the water level, depending on the time of year with the snow melt, the water speeds up. But when the water's going fast, it's a little bit less fun, because like if you see a piece of flat ground and you paddle and miss it, it might be an hour or 2 before you find another piece of flat ground. So it's when it's slower, it's better. But the thing is, there's an outfitter. They'll drop you off. They'll pick you up. They'll rent you the canoe. They'll rent you all the gear. All you need is to bring your food. They'll and a tent and stuff like that, right? But they'll give you all the gear you need. The whole trip, like if you two went on this trip together with your food, canoe, everything for 5 days will cost you less than $1,000 total. Yeah, it's the best experience of my life is that trip, and it's on all on my YouTube channel, Scott Stokely Canyonlands National Park, and I lay out the whole thing, how to do it, the outfitters, everything.
Nice.
Yeah, you have to do it. Now you have to do it.
I would have arrived at Candyland with backhand if I had known.
Yeah.
Okay, so last
I just
travel
went through
destination.
Zion 2 weeks ago, and it was pretty amazing.
It's unbelievable. Zion's unbelievable, but a lot of tourists.
Yeah,
but Zion's great.
So last travel destination question, the rest of the world. I think you've already answered it with New Zealand, but is there somewhere else that could rival New Zealand?
Yeah, so my favorite place is probably Japan.
Okay.
Just because I love the culture, I love the people. Everything about it is so Japanese. There's no other way to describe it. I mean, Japan is not, Asia is really big. So Asia includes India and Iran and Russia, and Vietnam. It's not Asia. It's not Southeast Asia. It's Japan, and it's just so unique. But I love everything about their culture. It's my favorite, probably my favorite culture to spend time with.
All right, what's your favorite non-tournament meal?
Favorite non-tournament meal? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna sound all hoity-toity, but anything from a street vendor in Malaysia. When we were in Southeast Asia, we went to Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia, Thailand, and once you get away from the tourist areas, which we don't like the tourist areas, you don't know what you're ordering. Like some places have pictures and you point to, other ones they don't. We would actually use our translator. We would just type in, we would use Google Translator, and we would type in, please order 2 meals for us, and just hand it to the customer next to us and let them order for us. And it was always amazing, but I can't tell you what I ate, but that's kind of the fun. It's like, it's like mystery meat during like elementary school lunches, except it's good.
You're the disc golf equivalent of Anthony Bourdain. I love it.
Mystery meat.
It was mystery. It was the mystery meat, but it's all. And by the way, in all those places I just mentioned, other than Singapore, your entire plate of food, plus like a Coke or a Diet Coke, I can't drink sugar, plus a fruit smoothie with fruit that you watch them pull off the shelf to make, all of it together, $1.
Wow.
If you pay $2, it's because you're a tourist and they can get away with it. But it's, $1, $1.25 is about what you could expect to pay in all of those places from the street vendors. If you go to a nice sit down restaurant, you might pay $5 or $7 for a meal. Right. But the street vendors, $1. Okay, perfect, so on a disc golfer budget.
if you're driving maybe in that box with the car with wheels or somewhere else, or if you're just waking up in the morning and you're getting ready to get it cranked up, not necessarily for the tournament, but what's your jam? What pumps up your jam? What's your music?
If I'm listening to music, oh my God, you're gonna okay, I like hardcore punk rock and Broadway show tunes.
Nice.
I'm not kidding. I could crank the Hamilton, or
what's your span?
Or Wicked, or Hair,
like
or
you got
Hairspray.
Just stretch out both arms, and you got one in one hand, and you got the other in the other hand.
Yeah, it's not on purpose. Like I listened to nothing but hardcore punk, and I used to be one of these idiots that thought, like, the minute I heard one of the bands I liked on the radio, I'd be like, they're sellouts. I'd throw their tapes away. I'd be so angry. Like, I was so diehard, I wouldn't listen to anything. And I got dragged like 10 years ago, kicking and screaming, to go see the movie Hairspray, the modern movie. And I'm like I don't know how I got talked into going to see this thing, right? But I hadn't ever really seen any musical, because I was so I already hated them before I ever saw them. And I remember sitting in the theater watching it with my jaw down, going, I was mesmerized by the idea of driving a story forward with a song. And like, it was, I was like, I'm not kidding. I kept going back. I think I saw it 4 or 5 times in the theater. Next thing you know, I'm like Now I'm like a musicals guy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened. I did not. It wasn't on purpose. I can tell you that. I fought it, kicking and screaming. But yeah, I like my show tunes.
We appreciate the candor. Thank you.
What's your favorite guilty snack?
When I'm not in training mode, I will eat ice cream every single day. And I will point this out because I talk about how great these countries are. You know, look, there's nothing worse than an American traveling to foreign countries talking about how much better they think America is. It's such a cliche. All these countries are amazing. They all have things about them that they do better than everything else. And a lot of these countries do things better than America. Sorry, America. America's not the best at everything, except ice cream. When I travel, this is the truth. This is the truth. Very few places do ice cream like America. America's got the market cornered on if you go to an ice cream parlor in America, you're gonna have a good experience.
Yeah,
for sure.
I've gone to ice cream parlors in Asia and in the UK where I walked away and then drove straight to like a Shell station and bought an ice cream out of the freezer because I was like so disappointed. So I'm sorry, rest of the world. America's got you beat on ice cream.
Well, there you go.
Secondary question, not part of the overall 20 questions, but cookies and cream or chocolate chip?
Probably cookies and cream, but I actually do plain chocolate everywhere because I'm a connoisseur of chocolate ice cream, right? So like every place does chocolate ice cream differently.
Okay,
so I'm kind of boring in that. It's the only boring thing I do probably is that I always order the same ice cream.
Well, it balances the hairspray and punk glam, wildly dissonant sonic action going on there. Okay,
well,
so
I don't drink, right? So like, since I don't drink, I do want to go have like the whatever guilty pleasure that people get out of going and having, throwing down a couple cocktails. I get that out of ice cream. Here's the saddest thing though, and I'm telling you, this is almost embarrassing, but I'll actually go have like one scoop in a cup because I don't want the carbs from the cone. I'm so focused on keeping in shape that I actually get like the little kid scoop, and like that's all I can do. I know.
Well, when
that's
you
not what I want.
When you enter your commentary only years, then you can have ice cream every night.
Yeah, well, no. So this is during the season, I should say. During the off season, I relaxed on the eating, and I didn't it wasn't out of control, but I definitely relaxed a little bit. Hey, let me tell you a funny ice cream story though. I had this amazing moment because I have about 120,000 people following me now. And because of my book, and I think a lot because of my honesty, and maybe because of my age, I've really made connections with a lot of people more than just like I watched this guy throwing frisbees. There's this moment that happened about a year ago or 2 years ago, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but all of a sudden, all the people that follow me started caring about me. And
really?
I'll tell you when it is because there was, up until this one moment, like 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, if I had said, "Hey, I'm going to take up ski jumping," every single person would have been like, "Hell yeah, we want to see you ski jump, post videos. Yeah, that's going to be great." Right? Doesn't matter what I said, how stupid it was, they would be behind it. And all of a sudden, one day, I hadn't eaten ice cream for like 3 months because I was training, or maybe 6 months, training so hard for the tour. So I posted at the end of the Disc Golf Pro Tour, I was like, "You remember that movie Super Size Me? Well, at the end of the tour, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to eat nothing but ice cream for 30 days." Because I wanted it so bad. And I said, I'm going to eat ice cream 3 meals a day. And I'll even track my progress. I was joking, but I wasn't joking. I was like, I'll track how many putts I make every day to see how it affects my putting, right? All of a sudden, all the responses were like, "Dude, you can't do that. You've worked so hard, man. Don't let yourself down. You're going to get sick. That's not good for you." All of a sudden, everybody cared about me and they stopped being fun.
That's hilarious.
But I swear the week before, if I had posted it, everybody would have been like, "Hell yeah, do it." So at some point, everybody's decided that they cared. I love it. It means the world to me. But it now I decided not to do the supersize me with the ice cream.
Probably a smart choice.
Yeah, probably.
But I will tell you this though, and I'm going to let you guys in. What do you call it when you it's a breaking story? You're like, I'll give you guys the first story, or the first
Speaking
to
of
hear the
ice cream,
story.
the scoop.
And I generally, when I say I'm going to do something, I tend to actually do it. When I was driving through Norway, we kept passing ski jump after ski jump after ski jump, the big massive ones you see on the Olympics. And by the time we were done, I had Adriana looking up ski jumping lessons. And my plan when I stopped touring, I want to take a winter and learn how to ski jump. So I wasn't joking about that. And so you heard it here first. I'm going to go off the largest Olympic sized ski jump at some point.
Nice.
I'm not.
We'll be with you in
I
spirit.
can
and
tell you
video.
100%. I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. I want to so badly now, but I can't do it in the off season when I'm competing because I am at my age. If I do break something, I probably don't come back from it competitively.
Yeah, probably not.
So I'll probably be 60 before I do it. But I even had to look up at what is there a legal age restriction? Like, do they allow 60-year-olds to ski jump? And they said they do. So I'm not joking.
Maybe the insurance and litigation precedents are a little less onerous in Norway. Okay, we're going to fire a couple more at you here real quick. Sports teams. I don't know if you're the type of guy who follows or has a particular heart given to for certain teams, but do you have any?
I was so happy for the Nuggets this year. I mean Nuggets, Broncos, and Rockies, and the Avalanche, just because I'm a Colorado guy. I actually I kind of don't watch a lot of sports, and I haven't for a while just because I don't have time with my businesses and everything else. I'm a much bigger fan of college sports.
Okay. Any
I have a hard time thinking there's as much at stake when the winners are millionaires and the losers are millionaires, and you know, as opposed to the story being told when it's like 99% of the kids in college in their senior year, they will never play their sport again. And to me, there's something about, even winning a small bowl game is more interesting to me than the Super Bowl, because that bowl game is everything to these kids. And so I do like college sports more. So I love Colorado State, who haven't really won anything before.
The Buffaloes. Yeah, I don't really have an NBA team because I grew up in Central Kansas and it was NCAA. I mean, the Kings moved to Sacramento long before I really got into them. And so I agree with what you're saying there. I really like the team aspect of that. It's getting to be more about certain players and stuff with the NIL, but the team aspect of it over the NBA is more centering on certain players. That's one thing that I really like a lot more myself.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something too. I love mixed martial arts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my jam. I mean, every single day I check in on like what's the latest update on fights being booked, and I got to actually spend time a fair amount of time with Ben Askren last year.
Nice.
And he's the I hope I don't like hurt his fighting reputation, but he's the sweetest, nicest guy with the most like beautiful family, and like just a real good dude. But yeah, I love MMA. I also hung out with Julian Marquez too, another UFC fighter. He's also a super cool guy.
Nice.
Yeah, I met Johnny Hendricks here once, and I really like the speed, but I also like the camaraderie of that sport too, because like they may talk a lot of shit leading up to the fight, but when it's over, they're handshakes and hugs, and they have a nice word for each other before they part most of the time. And I really think that I like that as well.
Well, here's something that I like too about it, which is there's a couple things about MMA that I like, which is the first is it is a fight to the death at the purest sense, because the idea of a fight being stopped, like say with an arm bar, the whole idea of that is if you were fighting to the death and we didn't stop it, you could break the arm. That person can't defend themselves. You can kill them. Like, it really is a fight to the death that people tap out early, right? So there's everything at stake. And something I heard Joe Rogan say, which I don't disagree with, which is all these other sports with balls are, balls meaning like basketball, football, baseball, frisbee golf. It's a way of basically doing MMA without having to beat the crap out of each other. You figure out some very civil way of doing what MMA has stripped down and done at its core, which is two people fight to the death. And all other sports are basically a way of doing that without those stakes. So I think it's just pure. It's
That's
a
an
pure
interesting perspective.
It's the most pure sport in my mind. I mean, it's not my favorite sport. Disc golf is, but I think MMA is the purest sport. I really do.
Very interesting. What about soccer? You got any soccer picks, or do you care about soccer? I've been watching a little World Cup lately. The Women's World Cup's going on, so that's pretty interesting.
Soccer. It rings a bell.
This sounds like a no to me.
They might repossess that motorhome you're in if you say anything bad about soccer.
No, I hate. You know what? I think soccer's great. I just didn't grow up on it. So I can appreciate that it is the global sport, and I can appreciate that the World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world. But I just don't. It's not my thing.
So what's your nerd alert? What do you like to geek out on? What's your super freak geek action? I mean, some of us it's D&D, some of it's the Stranger Things. What do you got?
I might be running a D&D campaign in my Discord server. I'm 100% pure nerd. No, I spend when I have time, which is basically rarely. I don't really listen to music. I don't, and this is when I'm not like, this is when I'm like going to bed at night, or if Adriana falls asleep before me. I just listen to documentaries on economics, history, science, sociology, philosophy. I like learning how the world works, so like the last video I read was about the hyperinflation that's happening in Turkey, and how there's the problem with the Kurds, and how Sweden's not behind what they're doing, which is keeping the Finland out of the UN. And I love that stuff. It's a reality show.
Yeah.
But it's a reality show with life or death consequences because it's real. So there's probably 40 countries that I could tell you all about their economics because that interests me. So that's nerd stuff, because it's not necessarily,
not as cool as Stranger Things, but a little more relevant.
Yeah, you may be looking for a while before you find a partner for that conversation.
Yeah, I also I don't watch pro wrestling anymore, but I follow it really closely. I don't like the modern product as far as watching it, but I forgot
you were a big wrestler fan.
I still love wrestling. I will listen to documentary after documentary after documentary about the old territory days and the old days. I listen to Jim Cornette all the time. He's got my favorite podcast. So I do like the old school wrestling. I don't like the new product, but I still follow like wrestling from 40 years ago.
Wow.
As weird as that sounds.
I love it.
All right. So who would be
wrestling? Here's the nice thing about wrestling. Since the outcomes are predetermined, you can watch a 40-year-old wrestling match, and it's not ruined by the fact that you know the outcome.
Because that's the way it was the whole time.
You're not watching for that reason, anyways, right? You're watching for different reasons. So I'll watch old matches. I'll watch the Midnight Express, fight the Rock and Roll Express, and enjoy every bit of that match. Can you cut me the power cords? I know that's nerd stuff there. That's old school.
Definitely nerd stuff awesome. There.
Thank you.
So if you could pick it, this will be the last question. We're going to move on. If you could pick it, who would be your 3 other members of your favorite all-time golf card? Selecting three other people that you want to play with the most. 3 disc golfers or just 3 people? Well, the question, as Paul wrote it, is golfers. So
okay, so
golfers. So 3 golfers to make your dream card.
I mean, God, I'll tell you what. So I've been asked this, probably 40 times, and I kind of just change my answer every time because I can't pick three. I would say, since we were talking about the book, I would put Sam Farron's on the card, just because I forgot until I wrote my book. I forgot what a huge part Sam was in my life. The first third of the book, Sam's the primary, secondary character in the book after me, right? So Sam Farron's I'll put on my card because I would love to play with him again. I would love to shoot around with Jim Kenner, put Jim Kenner on the card, and Dan Roddick.
Nice. So, speaking of your book, which again really shaped how I was thinking about this, we're going to start with the start, the origin story, part one of this whole interview, and we're not going to get through it all. Whereas the pace we're going, we don't want to keep you up all night because you still have to play at some point.
No. Here's the great thing about modern disc golf. I have not teed off before 1 p.m. this whole year, and rarely do I tee off before 3. So tomorrow I tee off at 4:30 because I'm on the lead card. Yeah, when you play well, you get to sleep in. So don't worry about that. I can. It's great to see both you guys again, man. I miss you. I love you guys.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Well, we love you too, bro.
I was really
all right. Well, then we're going. Let's go. Buckle in.
I was telling my wife. She asked me who's on the show again today, and I told her one of my early heroes. I mean, in the '90s, when I was growing up in the game, I'm always my mind is always attracted to the type of hero who's maybe, forgive if this sounds improper, but is somewhat flawed, who's not. I mean, between you and Climo, it was hard to love a machine. You were human, and I was just drawn to your iconoclastic kind of personality. I remember one of the first photos was from a tournament in Colorado, and you had a bowler hat on. And I thought, who is this guy throwing the big bombs wearing Doc Martens and a bowler hat? So that's where I'm coming from, but I may geek out at certain points in this. But
hey, I stayed at your house in the 90s.
You did. I remember that.
And I stayed at Brian Makes' house in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
Often.
And so
this is correct.
So I know you've covered this.
I've stayed at your house multiple times as well, but it's been a while.
Never been able to stay.
I will tell everybody. Can I tell everybody a Brian Mace story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was going to stay at Brian's house, and Brian told me, he goes, you need to bring food. I don't have any food. And I'm like, yeah, I forget what it was, but it was late. And I'm like, well, I'm sure I can find something. And Brian was clear. He says, I have no food in my house. And I went to his house, and I went through every single nook and cranny in the kitchen. And this is what Brian had in his house. He had beer. He had one thing of flavorless oatmeal, and he had a salt and pepper shaker. That's the end of the story.
I gave you inventory.
No. You don't understand. Everybody in the world that doesn't have any food has half-eaten Chinese in their fridge. You had a thing of flavorless oatmeal.
I bet I dragged the trash can over to the fridge and tossed all that stuff in it before you showed up, just to be like, hey, you know what? Look, all that half-eaten shit, it went out of here right before you showed up, but it's gone.
Right.
So
there you go.
You are. We talked to Nate and who else did we just talk to? Oh, Nolan, who've been playing for a long time, and they're now playing in their 40s, and they've been playing for 20, 30 years. You are the original template of that, because when the very first world course in the world goes in the ground at Oak Grove, you come scurrying out of the woodwork at some point in that first season of installation, and Oak Grove is where you learn how to play. And of course, there's only one course at the time, so that's what you're playing on.
It's the only course in the world, and I played it.
And now, was that, I mean, obviously your home course, and then when La Mirada went in, and when Huntington Beach went in, would you consider those to be rival courses? And you guys just had kind of like course gangs? I know that they called you the Junior Gophers.
Yeah. So I played my first round of disc golf in 1976, right after the first course went in the ground. No idea that it was special. It was just a thing that was in that park. Different parks had different activities, right? To this day, some park has a merry-go-round, some park has a swing set. That's all it was. It was just a swing set, except it was this frisbee golf thing. But at the time, I lived about 7 miles away. My dad had just passed away, and my mom would take me to local parks in the area. And every once in a while, we'd go to Oak Grove. It's like, oh, we're going to Oak Grove. Like, I have to bring a frisbee. But it was once every few months, and I certainly didn't know anybody or meet anybody. But I was there. I did play, so I still count that. But it was when I was 11 years old that I moved right down the street where I was walking distance. And the thing about Oak Grove Park was that at the time, it was very counterculture. It was, for the most part, people that played frisbee, not all, but most people that played frisbee were not part of mainstream society. They're not the people that trimmed their hair and hung out in the jock community. They were the hippies. They were the, blue collar. And what happened was that course was on the border of La Cañada Flint Ridge, which is extremely rich and conservative. And where I used to live was very blue collar. So when my mom started making a little bit more money, enough to move to La Cañada, which is what an amazing opportunity for a parent to give you, because every time you move up socioeconomically, you get better schools, better opportunities. But at the time, even though we were doing really, really, really well, I was the poorest kid in La Cañada. And without any frame of reference, not ever having been to Cambodia, like, I thought my life was awful because every kid had a nicer bike and they had designer clothing, and I didn't fit in at all. I was like, it's a John Hughes movie. Everybody's rich. I'm not. But here's this place, Oak Grove Park, with a bunch of people that were a lot like the people in the town I grew up in. They were just guys. And, it was occasional. I mean, T.D. Ugaldi, Beth Barish, Aaron Hart, but it was mostly guys. And that's where I fit in. And the funny thing is, though, I never really realized this until I wrote the book and examined the early days of my life. My dad had passed away. I didn't have a father figure. And these men at Oak Grove Park, the Oak Grove Gophers, all became father figures to me. And I, like, why was an 11-year-old kid attracted to a world of grown men who I had nothing in common with? Well, probably because I didn't have a dad. And that's really what they became to me. And the vast majority of these people were also flawed, just like me today, right? They were all flawed, but they all loved me, and they all took care of me, and they all had something to offer. So even though these are all flawed humans, there were some that knew how to tell a joke. There were some that knew how to work hard. There were some that were always happy when things went wrong, right? So I mean, I had a, like, raised by a village. I was raised by these men at Oak Grove Park, and they are, to this day, my favorite humans on earth. I mean, I am who I am because of the seeds they planted in me. Even though I took a few detours along the way,
Sure,
I learned from all of them. So that's started to get a little sappy on the interview, but that's what the Oak Grove Gophers were to me. They were my dads, and they raised me, and they did a pretty good job.
there's nothing wrong with being, just speaking the truth in that situation. I don't think that's sappy at all. And I think that's really interesting because, having known Nolan, I met Nolan when he was 9, and I didn't see as much of that in him, so to speak, because his dad was around for quite a long time. But I did see that, and I've noticed that. Well, I mean, that's just another common fiber, I think, in the people of the sport, and it's really one of the things that's kept me hanging out, because folks are great, and they will take care of each other in this scene without a doubt.
Yeah, and they did. They took care of me, in the best that they were able to do. I never walked home. I got a ride home from the park because we always played till dark. They never, not one time in a decade, did they let me leave me in the park, drive off and leave me there. Not once. They drove me home every day.
Wow.
Somebody. Yeah.
Now, aside from those, I know Mace has got a specific story of a rivalry that you had, especially with some of the younger kids, because that was a fertile area for disc golf growing up. And we've got some names that we're going to throw out with you. I'm going to let Mace go with this, but specifically Craig Leva, Steve Valencia, Sam Ferens, and Steve Rico. Mace, I know you knew Craig very, very well. You've got a specific story you want to talk about.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I got a bunch. So basically, what Paul's getting at is your early rivalries, you know, and I mean, and like, I know there was rivalries in this group, but I also know that you guys were also test pilots for a lot of the Innova discs in the beginning too, and you know, they'd throw them, and then they'd have you guys throw them, and I think that's a really phenomenal story too. But like, one of the things I've said this, I'm sure, to you, Tom, a few times, but I said this the first time at Round Rock when there was going to be a distance competition that included Scott and Craig. And I was like, and you know, every time I saw you go up against Craig, and if you threw first, it was over, because Craig would get mad because you threw far. And you know, and then it would just trigger him, and then he would react in anger, as opposed to just like, I said this, I go, you know what, if we just put a bag over Craig's head and let everybody else throw, and then walked him up to the spot and took the bag off and didn't tell him anything about what happened, then he'd probably be really competitive in this thing. But he watches Scott throw far, and he sees him throw far, and he gets pissed, and he loses his shit, and then he can't compete anymore, you know. And I saw that so many times. It's unfortunate, but I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Craig, I really miss him and everything like that. But talk a little bit about what it was like growing up with those guys, with Craig, Prepay, Leva. You got to tell that story too. Without a doubt, you have to tell that story. And you know, Steve Valencia, Sam Ferens, not as much growing up with Steve Rico because he was a little bit younger than you, but still, you know, you saw him come up. So
yeah. So first off, Craig Leva and Sam Ferens and myself, for a short period of time, were the three best juniors in Los Angeles. They both played at La Mirada. I played at Oak Grove. People like Mark Molnar and Mike Molnar and Mike Brignoni and a lot of good players came. Marty Peters came up, but there was a while where it was the three of us, and it was a very simple pecking order. Sam won, and then Craig and I almost beat him. But there was a period of time where it was Sam's world. But the strangest thing is that it is not. If you said that we were the three farthest throwers in the world as juniors, that it might not be untrue. Certainly there was nobody who was out throwing us. And for whatever reason, we all grew up in the same town and we all just mashed. The Craig Leva story was, okay, so, and people in Europe won't get this because you can just pump your gas here and go pay. Like you're like a civilized person. But in the US, you have to prepay, and that way they have your money, and then before they even turn the pumps on for you. And yeah, we pulled up to a gas station, and Craig was out of gas, and he pulled up, went in. I probably gave $20, which is a lot of money to us back then, to prepay. Got back into the car, forgot that he hadn't pumped his gas yet, and we drove all the way to Mesa's house before Craig's like, shit, I'm out of gas. Yeah, it was good. But Craig was beautiful. I mean, Craig was like,
well, to give people context on that story, like, he hadn't seen you in a long time. He had gotten married. He had bought a house. He was uber excited to show you all of that and introduce you to his wife and all that. And he just couldn't, you know, plus, you know, childhood friend and all that kind of thing. So that was that all balled up into the whole story there, and such a great story.
It was. Yeah. Craig's one. I mean, like, he's one of the good guys, you know, like Craig is one of those guys. This is one of the examples. There's many people out there like this, where if you know him, you knew what a good person he was. And he's just, his personality was just, he wasn't able to, he would say things that would make people have a problem with him. And you would just be like, Craig, you're a great guy. Why would you say that thing that you probably didn't even mean? But there's a list of people like that where you're like, people have mixed opinions about him, except for the people that really know him, love him.
Correct.
And that
Correct.
that would be great. Craig was a great
And I've,
guy.
I've had several people talk to me about that. Like, I never got that from him. And I was like, well, I never got what you're describing from him either. So I don't know. I've kind of been
Yeah.
lucky to get the other person from a lot of people, I guess.
Yeah. So Craig was amazing. Steve Valencia was the third player to go on tour. And there was a time where, I mean, look, the 90s belonged to Ken Climo, but there was a time when Steve Valencia was the clear number 2 player in the world. He would beat Ken occasionally. Ken was still number 1, but there's no debating that. But there was a time when Steve was a pretty good rival of his. Steve's just one of those guys. He had all the skills, he had all the talent. He didn't stay focused on disc golf, but that's understandable because back in the 90s, there wasn't the future that there was right now,
Yeah.
If Steve's one of those players where if he was playing in the modern era today, he would be probably a solid 10-30 rated player out on tour, connecting the dots and making 6 figures. But he was from that era, so he didn't get the credit he deserves, and certainly wasn't able to make a career out of it. And Steve Rico and Bomber, his older brother, they're the founders of Legacy Discs. Steve was that kid in town that everybody knew was going to be like a world champion when they were 7 years old, and he wasn't able to do it. But there's not a town in the world where everybody's not pointing at the 7-year-old going, that's the future world champion. Well, can't all be they can't all be right.
Sure, for sure. And he's knocked on that door, and he's come in top 5 more than his share of times too,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
and top 3 for that matter.
Surefire Hall of Famer, no doubt. Legacy makes great discs. I mean, they don't sponsor me, but they have my full support. Bomba and Steve and JR, their dad they're
all great people.
They were the first family of Southern California disc golf. I take lessons. One of the things about I always thought JR, the relationship he had with his boys was so good because he had that perfect balance of like, hey, I'll be your best friend, except when you need your ass whooped. and oh my God, in 2023, I just said the most horrible thing. It's like, yeah, try being a Hispanic father raising Hispanic children in a Hispanic gang neighborhood of Los Angeles.
Yeah, right.
And yet you come out with these 2 wonderful, respected young men, not young anymore, good men.
Super solid.
Yeah,
Super solid. Some of my favorite people in disc golf, without a doubt. I mean, I stayed with them. I was staying with them when The Price is Right happened.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I say. So, like, hey, you cannot second guess the way that man raised his boys, and with nothing but love. But he had that great balance of like, hey, I'm your friend until I need to be your dad, and when I'm your dad, I ain't your friend. It's not my job to be your friend.
Yeah.
Tonight,
right.
Tonight I'm going to be your dad, and I thought, yeah, he towed that line, I thought, as well as I've ever seen. So that's not about Bomber Steve, but it's about their whole family. I love those guys. I love all of them.
Great folks. Great people. Without a doubt. We're definitely going to have them on soon as well. So said, wait, I want to ask a question before we get away from this, because we got a lot more ground to cover, but you said the third touring player being Steve Valencia. So I know Ginley was one of 1 and 2. So who was the other one?
No, Ginley was number 2. The first was Glenn Whitlock.
Whitlock.
Yeah.
All right.
I wrote about this in my book. Okay. By the way, it's called Scott Stokely Growing Up Disc Golf. It's available at Amazon, and the audiobook read by me is also available at Amazon. So here's the thing about Glenn Whitlock. Well, so first off, I have to preface this. The definition of touring player is subjective. How many weeks, how many this, how many that. to me, the touring player is anybody who's out there putting food in their mouth from disc golf on the road, not returning home on the weekends. That's it. That's a pretty broad definition. But if you anybody that saved up money to hit the road for 6 weeks, that's not on tour. That's a vacation in my mind. So Glenn was the first player that hit the road and made his living and fed himself playing disc golf. And there's two things about Glenn that made this work, because back then you paid $30 to enter a tournament. First place might be 150. Second place might be 90. And he wasn't winning every tournament. Two things Glenn did. Number one, Glenn was a competitive eater. Like, he entered eating competition. Yes. Now, here's the thing about it. When someone says, well, I understand. My buddy Charlie can down food like you've never seen. That's the same as somebody when you tell them Paul Macbeth, they go, oh, well, my buddy Charlie's pretty darn good at disc golf. You're like, no, there are levels of what is at the highest level. Glenn and every single person from the 80s will tell you this, because we've all seen this. So there's not a bit of exaggeration here. I crossed my heart.
Oh shit, here we go.
Glenn had this is how Glenn survived on the road. Glenn had a rule. He would only eat at all-you-can-eat restaurants that cost less than $1 per plate. Now, the thing is if the restaurant only had one thing, like it was a spaghetti buffet or a pizza buffet, he could only eat 5 plates of food.
Okay.
If the place had a variety of food, he could eat 8 to 10 plates of food. So if you found an all-you-can-eat buffet for $7 or $8, Glenn would eat there, because for his $8, he might get 9 or 10 plates of food. And that is not an exaggeration. It's one of those weird.
And man, I've never seen him look fat ever.
No, he's small.
Like,
he's
where does
small.
he put it?
Hey, go.
How much does he give to Sue? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think none. So anyways, that's the first way Glenn. And the second way Glenn did it is he toured by hitchhiking.
Mm.
Yeah.
So basically, he would go to a tournament.
I gave him a couple rides.
Yeah, he would go to a tournament, and then if there was a tournament happening like 300 miles away, he would find somebody that was going to that tournament, either from that town or somewhere that was going, and he would ride with them, and then he would stay with them for the week and go to the next tournament. And he never drove. I still don't think he drives from town to town. And if he didn't have a way to get to the town, he would just stick his thumb out. And that's, he would hitchhike to the next tournament. But all that food in his stomach came from playing disc golf. So Glenn's the first touring player in my book.
Wow.
But then
I'll give you that. That makes total sense. All right, I got a great Whitler story. I don't know if you ever played the Spamtown Open, but it used to always be like the Monday after the Majestic in Austin, Minnesota.
Okay, sure.
And Sue and Glenn were there, and they had a VW bus.
Yes, the red one.
Sue, is it red?
Yeah,
okay.
I remember it. Yeah, they had it forever.
Sue was driving. Glenn was not driving. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm cruising down. I'm cruising south. Like, this is like like 90 minutes south of, if I remember correctly, it's like 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours at the most. Not very far south of the Twin Cities, but still in Minneapolis, or still in Minnesota. Yes. And it's a 1-day 2-rounder, and we're cruising. I'm cruising down there, and somebody was following me, but nobody was with me. And I see the bus from a distance. I'm like, wait a minute, I might know these people. And they had pulled off on a gravel road just like got around the corner, stopped immediately. And as I got closer, I saw Glenn, but I didn't see Sue. And I was like, all right, let's see what's up. So I pull in, I turn left right there, and I pull it beside him. And Sue gets out from under the hood in the back, and she's got grease to at least both elbows. And I'm like, hey, what's up? What's the problem? You need any help? And she's like, oh, no. And I think she might have just got it to where it would start, or just started it. Actually, I think she went and started it. And she's fully involved, and obviously the driver too. And so there's my Whitler and Sue story.
Yes, absolutely. That Sue was, they were the best. But yeah, he's my first. Dan Ginley was the first one to actually tour in his own vehicle, and then Steve Lynch rode him. So Dan Ginley actually drove in his truck from tournament to tournament. Jeff and Johnny Listman and Mike Williams were numbers 5, 6, 4, 5, and 6, and then I was number 7.
Okay.
All right, that's
Good
cool.
genealogy. Okay,
Yeah.
let's take it back to the 80s and let's talk a little bit about the very first beginnings of your PDGA career. Your first ever event, 1984 Huntington Beach Open. I believe there's actually footage still out there on the internet, either from 83 or 84. People can see what was kind of going on. This is just around the time the beveled edge was coming in, so you were probably playing with Moonlighters still at the time. But you play your first ever tournament, you win. Of course, it's only a field of 2, and Sammy Farrens at the time is playing Pro Open. So are you guys both the same age?
I think he was like a year older than me, but close.
So you're 14 and you have your first taste of victory. How does that feel?
Okay, so it actually wasn't my first tournament. That was my first PDGA.
PDGA.
My first tournament was in 1982, which was the Beach Bowl. And what was fun about the Beach Bowl was that it was an overall tournament, like there were. So there was Frisbee golf, there was also distance and MTA and all these things. All of them took place on the beach except for the round of Frisbee golf, which took place at Will Rogers Park on a temporary course. Back then, I do not believe anyone in the world owned 18 temporary baskets. In fact, and I don't even, to the best of my knowledge, Ed Hedrick didn't even sell baskets on stands. So all of the holes on my first tournament course were basically light poles with tape, 2 things of tape, and you had to hit between the tape, you hit trees. But the best hole on the course, and this is actually the best hole on the course, was you had to land your Frisbee onto a picnic table.
Really?
And the reason why that was the best hole on the course was because every other hole was subjective. Did it hit above or below the tape? Did it hit? I heard it take. I didn't hit.
All right. That
The
makes sense.
picnic table was the only definitive. I'm on the table, I'm on the ground. I made it or I missed. So that actually was the best hole on the course. And so I played in the juniors division as the only junior. And I won a bag full of Frisbees.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. But then I went to the Nevada State Championships and there was 4 juniors, which was incredible. And I won that one in 83. But then in 1984 was my first PDJ. I played juniors, and there's a picture of me getting my award on my website.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was here's the worst part of all. For whatever reason, they had like some beauty, like this 19-year-old beauty queen or something out there handing out the trophies, like with her, whatever they call that thing where they they put the
sash.
The sash. Yeah, she had her sash on, and she's like, and like a ring girl in MMA. She's like just there to like hand out trophies and take the picture. And she's basically like trying to like give me a kiss on the cheek, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. And I look back now, and I'm like, oh my god, if I knew what I knew today. But I was like this, I was just like 14-year-old kid who was terrified of girls at the time. So like to me, like she's gonna kiss me, But and then they captured.
This might catch you off guard by a second, but B's got the next 4 questions, and I have to go to the bathroom. I cannot wait. It's going to be bad if I do. So I'll be right back. B, handle this up, please.
Oh, actually, I'll tell you what. Why don't we take 30-second break, and I will go powder my nose.
Okay, why don't we all powder our noses then?
Okay. Yeah. Coffee break, right? Sure. I mean, peeing from the coffee. Yeah. I win. All right, so I don't know if this is going to be edited, so I'll just. What story can I tell while we're waiting? Yeah, something from my book.
Around that time we were just talking about.
Yeah. I got one for you here. I'll tell you a story from the book for those of you. I don't know if this is going to be edited out, but if it's live, I'll give you the story. So the interesting thing about, hey, I was going to share a story until Mace Man gets back. Okay, so the tournament I said in Las Vegas. Here's what's interesting about that tournament in Las Vegas. It was the first time a distance competition took place using this new thing called a beveled edge disc. Basically, we were throwing whammo frisbees, and then we were throwing whammo frisbees with added weight, but they were still frisbees. The Super Puppy came out, which is not a whammo frisbee, but it's smaller. And then in 1983, a Champion, which later became Innova, put out a disc called the Eagle. Not the same as the modern Eagle, but the original Eagle.
Right.
And there were Eagles. So I was at the 1983 World Championships, and the beveled edge disc came out, and they were predicting high winds the next day. So it was a guarantee that the world distance record was going to be set that day. And I'm like 14 years old, and I was spotting, along with Rick Schaefer, we were two of the people who were out in the field spotting, because when the distance throw comes, you put a flag down on the ground so then you can measure it. Right, put the flag down where the disc hit. And we were standing out there, Rick and I, and all of a sudden Frank Aguilera steps up and throws a shot, and the next thing you know, we're looking up and it's going over our head and we're chasing it down. The disc hits the ground, and I put the flag in the ground, and I put the flag down to mark the first world record ever set with a beveled disc. And that was the moment where I was like, that was a world record. I own Guinness Book of World Records. I'd seen pictures of the world's fattest twins. I'd seen pictures of the guy that could smoke 110 cigarettes at once, which these are the pictures that were in every issue of Guinness Book of World Records forever.
Right. I remember it.
They're on the motorcycle.
Yeah, but the twins on the motorcycle. I remember that.
We all own this book, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going in this book. And like, that was the moment where like, I'm going to set the world record someday. I want to be. And so I did spend a good part of my youth practicing just throwing distance. I was out in the field throwing distance instead of just playing golf, because I wanted to set the world distance record. But it started that moment that I marked that shot.
That's an amazing connection. The fact that you put the flag down for that first beveled edge world distance record.
It is.
Wow. That's mind blowing. The coincidence.
So people actually said they said my book is a lot like Forrest Gump, who was there at all these points in history, because I was there for all these parts of disc golf history, which is true. And it's not, I'm not just painting myself into the story. I was at all these like monumental events in the history of our sport. However, so is everybody else. We were a small sport. If there was a big tournament, we were all there. So it's not this weird coincidence that I happened to have been there to see all these things happen. We all were. There were only 12 of us, or whatever,
But I mean, you had the fortune of growing up on the West Coast. You could have been, say, in Rutgers and, learning from the ultimate people there, learning their mistakes rather than being right on the ground floor when the new discs were coming out.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So this is one of the only things that I find that I'm disappointed about my book, because I'm very proud of it, and I do believe it. I put a lot of work into it. I think it's very well done. It's very good. It's very honest. Mm-hmm. The only part that I am disappointed in is that I'm also telling the history of disc golf, because I was there at the beginning. And so it's not names and dates. I'm telling all these historical events, all of them through my eyes. So when I tell the story of Glenn Whitlock in my book, I'm not talking about Glenn Whitlock. What I'm telling the story of is how I heard about this crazy Canadian dude that was traveling around the country. Well, how does he do it? So I'm telling the history of the sport through my eyes. There's unfortunately very much a West Coast bias to it. And I tried very hard to include all the movers and shakers out east, but there's no way that it is definitely, there's a bias to the book, and it's
Well,
unintentional.
But
You know,
I mean,
I'll give you one thing.
I
I
think
talked
it's
about
unavoidable though, because that's where your roots are plant. I mean, that's where your roots
No.
come from. You know.
Sure, no, and I don't fault that, but you know, I'll give you an example of something that crushes me that I left out, is that I talked about the early series, the first tours in the sport, like the Can-Am series.
Yeah.
The Can-Am series, I talked about the Can-Am series, Circular Skies over Texas, and the NorCal series. And I completely forgot about the Mid-Atlantic series, which was doing everything NorCal was doing, and it's not in my book, and that's not fair. It should be in my book. But I recorded an audio book. It's like I can't re-record the audio. So yeah, that's my only regret on the book, is that there's a bias, and there's even an international bias. I mean, there's a whole story being told in Europe and Australia, New Zealand that I didn't include.
well, you know what? There's a perfect opportunity out there for anybody to pick up the challenge and write the history from their region, from their perspective. We want the East Coast
Absolutely.
region. And
Yeah,
okay,
for
so
sure.
this tangents nicely into your second ever event, which is 1985, and now you
Yeah.
find yourself in Sweden of all places. You go to the WIFDIF. Of course, Sam Ferrens already is the world champion. He goes to the WIFDIF Worlds and wins there. But
Yeah,
this is your
in the
first
open.
experience in the open, right? But you're playing junior boys. There's 21 of them. You take second. Should be noted here, due to the research, we found out that Chris Heiming was there and took 15th. But
Oh,
talk
did
to
he?
us. He did, I know, right?
Wait, as a junior or as an open player?
As a junior.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay, that's wow. That's
You-
I
You beat him
didn't
by
know.
so much. He was one of the faceless, unwashed down there in the lower cards. Don't
Yeah.
even worry about it.
That's
But
wild.
talk to us about this. Like, how did this? Come on, that's just for narrative purposes. But how did this come about? I mean, you must have had a trip to Sweden when you're 15. That's not easy to afford. What were the circumstances?
No,
behind that?
so here's this is interesting because we did well, but we were we like, I don't think we could have afforded maybe to go to Sweden for a trip. I mean, airline tickets back then were more expensive than they are today. It was a big trip. And I don't know how to say this, but a male friend of my mom's floated the cost of the trip. And I don't know what the arrangement was there to make it happen. You know, I don't know how else to say it.
Did you go? Did your mom go, or did you just go?
No. I went with Rick Schaefer, Dan Roddick, and Sam Ferrens. So the four of us
Wow.
went.
Nice.
Yeah, it was an amazing trip. But honestly, I mean, I was only there for like 5 or 6 days, and I didn't appreciate it at 15 years. I mean, what do we really appreciate when we're 15? Like, you know, I was there to play disc golf. I wasn't there to like see the world, you know. And so, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it or appreciate it, but it not the way I appreciate things today.
Well,
You know?
and you know, and you can't. I mean, like, you're just, wow, that was a long plane ride. Okay, let's go.
Right.
Come on, you know, you're 15, you want to
Right.
compete, you know. And what, Sam
Yeah.
was a year older than you at that point?
I think he was a year old. I was like 15. He was 16.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, we were close, but he was always better. When I was younger, you know, I mean, at some point in the 90s, you know, we swapped places because I started playing better. But there was, for the first 10 years of my life, probably Sam was definitely a better player than me. But
And
yeah, it was fun.
did-
And then
did-
by the way, I just got to go to Helsingborg, Sweden again a month ago. But we
Nice.
didn't actually go to the course. We just drove through it.
So I know you said you were only there for a couple of days. Did it leave any impression on you so that when you went back there, you were like, oh yeah, that's where we stayed, or was it just like from the eyes of
It's
the-
just it just was part. It's something I did as a kid. I mean, it just wasn't. You know, I said the appreciation is like. I mean, our kids don't appreciate us. I'm sure I didn't appreciate mom at the time. It was just something, you know. One thing I will tell you that just in hindsight felt awkward is that here I am going to Sweden, and almost none of the Oak Grove Gophers. A couple of them actually went to the tournament, but the majority of them, that was not or was never going to be in their wheelhouse financially. And so I didn't realize until when I look back at it that kind of was like very entitled on my part, you know, that not entitled, that made me, very, I wasn't one of them in a sense also, because
kind of a divisive thing.
I had advantages. There's no question.
Was there enough time there with the international travel with the group that you went? Did you and Sam even bond more because of the travel and because of the experience?
You know, we were always friends, but we were always rivals. But we've always been friends.
So Stork had to sit in between you two on the plane?
No. I've always cared for Sam, and I think it's mutual. I mean, I saw Sam in Norway 2 weeks ago, and we hugged longer than most men hug. I mean, it was so lovely to see him. I love watching him and his beautiful family, and he's been so successful with his career and I'm so happy for him. I mean, he's one of the people that put his time in, and he's got the rewards. I mean, he's got a successful career because of the relationship he built with Dave Dunapace and Innova, and obviously because he's good at what he does. So yeah, I love Sam. So yeah, we were always friends. It was always friendly, but yeah, at the same time, you know, he always beat me. I'll tell you what, I still remember Sam used to have the world distance record, and I had a poster of Sam on my wall, and I wrote, no, this is true. I wrote, so far, so good, so what? And I had that on my wall for a very long time. Yeah, and then, oh, by the way, I'll tell you a funny Sam story too. So I forgot all about this, but I do a Christmas podcast every year where I bring on like 20 or 30 different pros, 10 minutes at a time for 3 hours. And I had Sam on, and Sam told this story that I'd completely forgotten about. And this is the story Sam told. But this is what happened. So Sam lent me a jacket back like sometime in like the 80s or something, like late 80s. He lent me a jacket, and next time I saw him, I returned the jacket to him. Well, he had the jacket for months before he found something. He found a note that I'd sewn into the inside of the jacket. And the note that was on the jacket was, it basically said something like, while you're goofing off, I'm practicing harder than you, and I will beat you.
Really?
Yeah, and that was not the exact words, but something like that. But I sewed that. Apparently, I took the time to sew that into the jacket for him to find months later. He turned it inside out, and there's a note sewn in there.
That segues nicely. I mean, in 86, you play your third event, and you're getting closer. This is when you're now playing Open. You're 4 behind, but finally, 1987 dawns. You play your first event of the year. You get your first pro win. You beat Sam. He comes in second. I forget now how many close strokes it was, but there's 42 players. This is the big Bud Light Wintertime Open. This is, I mean, back in the day, we had the tournaments that started the season and the tournaments that ended the season, and that was the one that started the pro season.
It was absolutely one of the several biggest tournaments of the year. To give you an idea, there was $600 for first place. That was unheard of back then. Long Rod Open had $1,500. Wintertime Open had $600. I don't know if any other event in the country had a larger first place payout. So players traveled from all over the country to play that tournament, and it was at my home course. And yeah, that was my breakout. You know,
well, not only that, but sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I keep prefacing this by saying this is a true story. But it's actually funny because Adriana, who's now crashed out, but she read my book and heard all these stories, and it's not that she didn't believe me, but there are a lot of them that are pretty outrageous. And then over the last 3 years, she has systematically met people that were there for almost every one of these stories. And she's like, after all, she's like, those are all true, aren't they? I'm like, yeah, they're all true. So this is what I did in 1980. This is what I did in 1987. I was so arrogant and I was so cocky. And remember, this is very countercultural. This is not the modern professional, like sport we know today. There were talented professional athletes, but it was definitely not mainstream. And what I did at the Wintertime Open, before the finals, because we had a final 9, so the top 3 players played an additional 9 holes. Before we played the finals, I took a T-shirt, and on the back of the T-shirt, in big as I could write it, I wrote "Thought I wouldn't" with a big question mark. And during the final 9, every time I made a shot or every time I made a putt and everybody started clapping, I turned my back to the audience and just pointed at my shirt. What, you thought I wouldn't? I did that.
Oh, the cockiness. I love it.
No, it is one of those things that's like, my God, what an asshole I was. I mean, I was just some punk kid, but I mean, that attitude. But I also backed it up. If I did that and didn't back it up, then it's embarrassing. But when you back it up, it's kind of like, you got a problem? Then beat me. The interesting thing about it is that I thought at that point I already thought I was the best player in the world. I just beat a who's who of world champions at that tournament. And I thought I was the best player in the world. And I did not win another pro tournament for 4 years. I didn't play a whole lot. There weren't a whole lot of tournaments, but this wasn't a trend of winning tournaments. This was I wasn't as good as I thought. How about that?
Well, it is interesting when you have said publicly, you talk about the mentors and early father figures for you. It included Joe Orsino, the 2 Lissamans.
Yep,
and
very much.
That was your event where you beat all those guys. Sammy was 2nd, Joe Orsino was 4th, tied with Jeff. Johnny was 7th. Future PDGA world champion John Ahart was 10th. So you did absolutely back up all that trash. Now I'm just going to finish here in 87, then we're gonna go on to the 90s. But last thing, this is your first time going to the Worlds in Toronto. Well, the first time that the Worlds are held outside the United States, and you come to Toronto. Now, because I'm in Toronto, we might have some Toronto viewers. Talk to us about maybe Sweden didn't leave any impression, but did Toronto leave any impression on you?
Yeah, I mean, so everything left an impression. I mean, I didn't say it didn't leave an impression. I just said I didn't appreciate it.
Okay.
It was still this idea of traveling around the world. So yeah, I went to the World Championships in Toronto. And I'll give you a quick, I'll go a little bit earlier on that trip, because here's the thing, was that I didn't have the money to go to that trip. My mom wasn't paying for that trip. And the reason I was able to go to Toronto, this is back when you could enter the World Championships at the last minute because it didn't fill. Actually, Toronto needed 2 courses. There were so many players, which was a new thing, that you needed 2 courses because there were more than 72 players. So at the tournament, at the La Mirada Open in 1987, I was in 2nd place. I made the final 9 again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to win this tournament too, because I'm the best in the world. And I totally played terrible in the final 9, dropped to 4th place. So, and I wrote about this in my book. So because I was such an asshole, as I previously stated, I decided at the award ceremony that I was going to show everybody that I was so good that 4th place made me so angry that I'm going to throw every one of my discs into the lake. So one at a time, I threw from Tournament Central all the way, at the time, probably like 400 feet, but with these old fashioned discs, one at a time into the lake. And on the final throw, I slipped, fell, and broke my arm. Not my right arm, my left arm. Okay. Yes. God's honest truth. I broke my left arm, right? So here I go telling the story. And I'm wearing the PDL hat, which is like the club of these, the bad boys of Los Angeles. Great guys, but these are the guys that loved the Thought I Wouldn't shirt, right? And so, but I'm in the PDL club, and then I broke my arm. So 2 days ago, literally 2 days ago, I run into two players here in Finland who were at the tournament after La Mirada Open, but before the World Championships, which is in Fort Collins, Colorado. They were there, and they said, and I just run into them like, yeah, we met you in 1987. And I'm like, no way. And they're like, yeah, I think I even got a picture of you. And they pop open the phone, and it's a picture of me wearing a PDL hat with a cast on my arm. And I just posted this picture to my Facebook page yesterday.
I saw it.
Yeah. So this is what's so funny, which is like, it's like, oh my God, you really did break your arm throwing your discs into the pond. I'm like, yes, I got a cast on. Here's the picture from the event the week after, 2 weeks after. So anyways, I go to Toronto, and I had a soft cast on my left arm, and no chance of playing well, because basically it wasn't my throwing arm, but every time I went to go to throw, it would hurt, and you kind of wince, and it's impossible to play when that's, so I finished 20th place.
20th.
Toronto was,
sorry.
No, Toronto was great because it took place on Toronto Islands. And
where was the second course?
What?
Where was the second course? On the island as well?
Yeah, both on the islands. And we would ride every morning you would ride the ferry. All the players would ride the ferry out to the island. And this is what was great about it, is that everybody would ride the ferry, and you would get to the course about an hour before. But if you missed that ferry, you would ride a ferry that was like 30 minutes later, but it took you to the far side of the island and would take you like 20 to 30 minutes to run across the island to the course. So every single day, 90% of the players would make it to the ferry, but the 10% of players that missed the ferry would have to take the second ferry. And right as they're yelling 2 minutes, you would see like a half dozen players like, right. They just run like 20 minutes to get to the course. That was every morning. Oh, it was ridiculous. Every time a boat would drive by, like, because we're on Lake Erie. Every time a boat would drive by in Lake Erie, like, you would just see discs flying at it. People were like throwing at boats, and it was just ridiculous.
Lake Ontario, but still.
Or no, I said Lake Ontario. Yeah. So yeah, it was wild, man. It was all fun.
There's not very many experiences like that where you have to ride a ferry to get to the course like you do it on Toronto Island.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And I'll tell you, here's one of my favorite stories from that event is I was out there with Jeff and Johnny Lissaman, and one of the for some reason, I don't know why, but well, I guess I do know why. It was the 80s. There was this East Coast, West Coast rivalry. And I think it was the 2-pack Biggie Smalls thing, kind of like, I don't know why, but it kind of crossed over to disc golf. And for some reason, there was this rivalry completely for no reason whatsoever. But there was, those, so people on the West Coast, a lot of them would be like, those Easterners, they're not going to come out to the West Coast and beat us, And one of the big rubs that the East Coast players would talk about, and this is actually true, is that a lot of the West Coast players would go straight to the end of a factory. Back in those days, it was very small. They'd go straight to the end of a factory. They would handpick the best discs, the best plastic, the best, grape ape AVRs and bubblegum, or grape ape arrows and bubblegum AVRs and all this premium plastic, right? And the people on the East Coast used to complain that they couldn't get any good plastic. It's not true. I mean, Innova made great discs, but there was something to the fact that these limited runs of like whatever, like we would gobble those up and they wouldn't get them. So, anyways, Jeff and Johnny Lissaman, where I'm traveling with Jeff and Johnny. So I go out there, I'm staying with Jeff and Johnny, and every morning we'd ride the ferry out, and there'd be like 100 and some odd players on the ferry. And then all of a sudden, like the first day, Jeff just goes, check this out, everybody. And he pulls out this like beautiful, like pink AVR. Like, look at this. It's a bubblegum AVR. Is it, does anybody want to buy this? And he passes it around, and people are like, oh, I'll give you $15. I'll give you $20. A lot of money back then for a $7 disc, because we were all poor. Oh, I'll give you $25 for it. And I saw Jeff take the disc, and after people were done bidding for the highest bid, he goes, nope. And he throws it over his shoulder into the lake. And then Johnny pulls out like, oh, I got a grape ape arrow, same exact thing. And they, oh, I'll give you $25 for it. Johnny's like, nope, throws it over his shoulder into the lake. These guys brought extra high-end premium Innova discs just to show the East Coast players.
Oh man.
And then they tossed them in the water.
The long
crazy.
game on that. Holy
Well,
cow.
You could have
Yeah, they
probably
planned
safely swam in the lake back then to get him back, but
Yeah,
I don't know about all that.
No.
They helped contribute to the plastic reef there in the middle of the bay. That's very nice.
Yeah. I'll tell you one other thing just to kind of show like how weird things were back then. I showed up a day after Jeff and Johnny Lissaman, and what's really nice is that there was a college that was didn't have classes for the summer, so they had their dorms. We got to use their dorm room, so each room had like 2 bunk beds in it, and I'm staying with Jeff and Johnny. I'm going to sleep on the floor, but I'm a kid, whatever. We did that all the time. But we got to rent a dorm room for like, probably like $20 a night or something that the disc golfers could afford. I mean, all the disc golfers stayed at the dorms because nobody could afford like a real hotel back then.
Cool.
Most of us. So anyways, it's just so bizarre. But we go into the room when I first get there. I mean, I meet him out wherever. We go back to the room and we go in there and the entire room is packed with furniture. There's like the 2 bunk beds, but then half the room is just tables and chairs and sofas just stacked up like a giant storage closet, like just piled all the way to the roof.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what's going on? And Johnny's like, they left the senior lounge open. What do you mean? So we went and took all the furniture from the senior lounge and brought it in here. And just that for no reason. They just took all the furniture from the senior lounge and just piled it up in the room just because. Just because.
Hey, they're twins. They have their own language, their own rationality.
Well, and the thing about it is, like, at the time it made no sense, but when you look back on it, like, that is amazing on so many levels. I love those guys. I love Jeff and Johnny Lissaman. They were so important in my life. But they just did random things that made sense to them. And they filled a room full of furniture. Literally there's no room to like put your stuff because they've had to have a pile of furniture.
That's a good one. I can't explain it.
That's a great story.
No, it's a great story.
So let's move from the 80s to the 90s.
Okay.
You really kind of come into your own in the 90s. You start winning, you start rising and emerging. Well, I'll leave this part to Mace.
So you said back in the 90s, and this is pretty interesting, and I'm going to let you go on this for a little bit, and then I'm going to bundle some information behind it. But you said in the 90s that your main rival wasn't Ken Climo, but rather it was Barry Schultz. And I don't know that a lot of people have a great understanding of what the meaning behind that is. But one of the things that it stood out to me as soon as I read it was, I remember meeting guys in Florida in '98, and they're like, dude, you don't understand. We're playing for second around here. I mean, every now and then the champ stumbles, but for the most part, we're all playing for second. And I don't know that anybody can relate to that anymore because there is so much great talent out there. But talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so Ken Climo was not my rival because Ken Climo didn't have any rivals. Period. Ken won. And that's just the way it worked. And every once in a while, somebody would play well and beat him. Like I had some great doubles tournaments at Round Rock where we were playing a big long course, and
We're gonna get to that.
things like that.
Up.
But he didn't have rivals. Ken was in a world of his own, and that's just the way it worked, Like Ken won, and we were playing for second. We didn't know it at the time. We thought we were playing to win, but he is one of those people that was better than you, and it always seemed like if you played as good as he was going to play, he somehow just played better. and it's just one of those things that was just like, believe me, it was terrible. It was awful, but it's just the way it was, you know. Like, I'm not, like, I'm honest. I'm honest about my place, and to call Ken Climo a rival would be unfair to Ken. It would be untrue. Ken didn't have a rival in the 90s. Early 90s, Steve Valencia, you know, I know CJ Willie, like, you know, in Florida had his moments. I know Ron. What did I say? I say CJ, sorry, CR Willie.
CR Willie, yeah.
CR Willie was, you know, and of course Ron Russell broke the streak, but I don't think Ken, I don't think Ken really had a rival, in my opinion, between Steve Valencia and Ron Russell. And I was in the middle there, but I would not call myself a rival. He just beat me. It's one of those things where, like, I had to come to grips with it. It was very difficult for me at the time because I don't know this for sure, but I am pretty confident. And if someone really wanted to look at the stats, they could do it. And if I'm wrong, I'm not wrong by much. But I believe from like 1993 to 2000, I believe I had a winning record over every other player in the sport. And
I would accept that.
yeah,
100%.
and if I'm wrong, it's like it was, you know, 4-3 or something like that with somebody like in 1999 or something like that. But I think I did.
One of the great things as we get forward, we're seeing this diversification of talents with disc golf, is we're seeing people who are stat specialists, and you have a website like Statmando, and they're only expanding in the records. Eventually, we're going to have the Stokely versus everybody in the 90s record available, but they just haven't inputted the information enough yet.
Yeah, and exactly, and they just haven't got the old numbers. But yeah, so basically, I am, to the best of my knowledge, the clear number 2, and even to a point, the trivia question, which is, during Ken's run of world championships, there's only one player to finish second place to him twice, and that was me.
That is correct.
And the best at the Worlds, which is a regular article at Disc Golf World News, I was number 2 for years. So I was a clear number 2 for a period of time. And so the idea that, like, you know, at the time, certainly the very best player in the entire world, and here I am number 2, but I'm playing at the wrong place at the wrong time, was like, wow, if I had played later or earlier, maybe I have world titles. I mean, you know, singles titles. You know, I feel like I feel like Karl Malone. You know, and Karl Malone has 2 world titles if Michael Jordan wasn't playing then. Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler won 2 NBA titles. Do you remember those 2 years that Michael Jordan didn't play? And it's like, it's very frustrating. But the thing that I always just took, you know, it took me a while to get over this. But I remember an interview with Charles Barkley where he said that I'm going to, like, quote Charles Barkley. This is what he said. He goes, you know, my daughter asked me the other day, how come I could never beat Michael Jordan? And my answer was, because he was better than me. And I'm like, you know, when it comes down to it, it's just, maybe it's nothing more complicated than that. You know, he was better than me. He was better than all of us. So, you know, it's hard to have dealt with, you know, it's hard when you play against the best and you're the exact same damn age as them.
Right.
But yeah. So the point is, sorry, very long answer to that question, but I was not Ken's rival. Ken had no rivals.
Now, it's interesting. We did talk to Barry earlier, and it's interesting that you said quite on your own that Barry was your rival, and Barry has said that the key to his development as a real pro, as like going from, you know, regional pro to national pro tour status, was you telling him, Barry, you need to come to California. The road to the championship comes through California first. And he came out, I think it was Santa Cruz, and his eyes were open. You were the one who said, this is the birthplace of legends. You got to come.
Oh, that's really sweet of him. Well, now it's like, well, look at what I did to myself, because actually We both flew into California and rented a car together, and then Barry won that tournament. So here, be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
at least you're
I love.
inviting. Hey, if you're the bridesmaid, at least you're inviting the groom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the reason I call Barry my biggest rival is because I just look at the matches that we had, and the thing about Barry that I thought was so fun was that for many years I beat Barry almost every time. I did to Barry what Ken did to me almost every tournament because I would always edge him out. I would get him on the last hole. I would get him in sudden death. We were so close, like so damn close, except for some reason I would elevate my game to beat him. And then there was this one clear moment where Barry beat me and then never looked back. And then all of a sudden I rarely beat him after that. And so it was a great rivalry because it wasn't a back and forth rivalry. I had his number and then he got Barry. Now, once Barry wins those 2 world championships, when you look back and you say who was the better golfer, it's Barry Schultz. He's got the world titles. I don't. I had 2 second places to Ken, but he had 2 first places when Ken was second. So even though actually, if you go to Statmando, we're basically one head-to-head apart. Like I think I'm beating him like 36-35 or something like that in tournaments. But I still concede that Barry's the better golfer because he got over the Ken Climo. He solved the Ken Climo riddle. I didn't. So I concede Barry's. Barry's on my Mount Rushmore of disc golf. I am not on my Mount Rushmore of disc golf.
That's 2 excellent ways of putting that. Wow.
Yeah,
that's good.
I know that the Hall of Fame should be calling soon, and certainly one of the reasons why, at least one of the major bonus items in your resume, Mace National Doubles.
Right. Well, so there's a whole lot of other 90s events that we could have covered, but obviously, one of your great claims to fame was the three-peat with 3 really drastically different partners. I mean, you had Valencia in 94, and then you had Randolph in 95, and then you had Brad Hammock in 96. And why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I mean that.
So these are all good players. So first off, it starts with John Haug. Well, let me go prior to this. Courses were par 54. There might have been like one par. There might have been one par 4 or something like that. But they were basically disc golf in the 80s and 90s was approach and putt. And the reason I call it approach and putt is I could reach nearly every hole on planet Earth with a rock, a mid-range disc. And I know others that didn't throw as far as me, but that's not my fault. I throw as far as a modern disc golfer throws. I could still reach holes with a mid-range disc. So at the highest level of the game and power, I could reach it with a mid-range. So it was who could approach and putt the best. I really feel like that's what it was for the most part. John Haug said, well, we need to be, or I would like to be more like ball golf. And he built a 9,000-foot course, still short by today's standards. But a 9,000-foot course with those discs is about the same as a 12,000-foot course with modern discs. So it's probably actually comparable, except the modern courses would have OB on every hole, and But so here I'm getting to play the course, the only course in the entire world that actually favored my skill set, because I threw so much farther than everyone else on tour at that point. So I was like, hey, I know it's a doubles tournament, but I can win this tournament with anybody. And so I was like, I'm just going to take on a different partner. I ended up with 4 different partners. And basically I wanted to show that, hey, there is a type of golf that I'm the best at. And that was my motives behind that. And now, does that mean that I would have won singles? There's no way to predict that, but I feel like my chances would have been pretty darn good. I mean, you have an 800-foot hole and I'm throwing a 500-foot drive and someone else can only throw 400 feet. They have to throw max distance twice, where I can actually have a 300-foot approach shot I feel like my odds are pretty good of beating everyone in the world on that hole. And there were a lot of holes like that. So I always felt like that was, at least I got one course in the world that actually, and I mean, in the world that actually favored my skill set. And so, yeah, I wanted to show what I could do.
So,
well, that, you know, we talked about that. We've talked about Round Rock and, you know, like around here, they didn't say who you're going to doubles with. Everybody just said who you're going to Round Rock with. And it would start usually at the VPO. Like, you know, who you're going to Round Rock with next year. And it's, you know, that was something everybody looked forward to from a lot of different places. I think we talked about that with Ginley, and we talked about it with a couple other players too that we've interviewed already. And that's, I mean, I remember going out there and it was like us and the dude with the remote control boat. Long before the planes, long before the soccer players, long before the ballpark, long before that shingle farm that surrounds that whole place now. I mean, dude, you wouldn't even recognize it now. Like the only thing that would really take you back is the blue bonnets, you know?
I know I've been there. Well, the thing is, people don't understand is that doubles used to be a bigger deal back then too.
Oh, it was great.
Everybody went to this tournament. I mean, it was a who's who of the best players in the world. Like there, you know,
again, another starting tournament. You know, that's what kicked off the season. It was like in February, early March, wasn't it?
Well, it was in March. Yeah, it was usually in March. So you never knew what kind of weather you were going to get, but you always knew that the best players were going to be in the open division. I mean, yeah,
this is the only time actually. I've only cried one time, actually tears crying after losing a tournament, and that's when I, after winning 3 in a row, when I did win the 4th year in a row, and I played with the same partner that I had the previous year, which
had to be the reason.
Yeah, I mean, I broke my little thing, but that was the first time where I felt like I lost something that belonged to me. Like I go, I'm the best doubles player in the world, and I'm the best player in the world on the long course, I believed. And as long as I keep winning this tournament, this is my like identity. Like this is my, you know, Ken Climo is the Terminator, right? I mean, he's just indestructible. He can't be stopped. He can't be reasoned with. He can't be talked to. He's gonna come and he's just gonna whoop your ass. But there was this one little pocket here that belonged to me, which was, hey, I'm going to go win. So when I win, I was crushed. I ended up winning like again, but I remember driving. I was on Highway 287 driving north of Dallas, and I pulled over and I just started sobbing because I was like, damn, it was like I had one thing in this sport.
But let it be known that it wasn't Kenny who tarnished that sun for you. It was the combination of old school boozers, Mitch Mack and Crazy.
Wasn't Mitch Mack and Crazy? Oh, really? Okay. So we beat them in sudden death the year before, so they won that year.
Yeah.
That's right. I forgot about the sudden death year. I remember there was something that was kind of like them getting over the hump.
Yeah.
When they won. And I remember Crazy rolling around in the money in the grass, and you know, and I mean, maybe that's what made you cry. I don't know.
No. I just remember feeling like it's like you have to understand growing up in a world with Ken Climo in it. It's like God, really? It's
and he ruled there before you started ruling. Him and Greenwell won that thing 3 or 4 times, didn't they?
I don't recall because I only went there once before.
They won it a bunch of times like that, and that was where all of us learned about who they were. I mean, nobody around here knew about Dean Tannick until he came to national doubles. You know what I mean? And like people came. Barry and
no internet. But then so that's what I mean. So when you're living in Ken's world and Ken just wins everything, and it's he's like you said, he's the Terminator. And then there's this one little pocket that belonged to me that when I lost it, it was like, really? You know, even in call like think about playing in an era with someone as good as Ken, is that even if no one even ever said this, like if you won a tournament that Ken wasn't at, like it's almost unspoken that like, well, if Ken was here, you know, do you think he still would have won? You know, like that was always.
I remember local rivals that would say that. Oh, you mean so if I'd have gone, I'd have won? And it's like, no, you didn't go. So F off and F off. You know,
and that's what I would tell somebody. But just because you say it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
You know, so I, you know, That's what it's like when you're playing against the best.
Well, so let's roll from your glory story and doubles to your almost glory story, being the '90s Worlds, because you were in the hunt most of the way. I mean,
Yeah.
you had one finish that was outside the top 10 in '93, but '92 you finished 8th out of 164, tied with Jeff Lissaman. '93 you finished 18th, tied with Wise Cup out of 136. Then '94 you started climbing again with a 5th place finish out of 151, tied with John Ahart, 1 stroke in front of Craze. Then '96 4th out of 160, 4 strokes behind your national doubles partner Brad Hammock. And then '97 2nd out of 157, '98 2nd out of 177, '99 4th and 173, and then 2006, and then we never saw you again for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very easy trajectory to chart. I got better and better and better, and then I started having troubles with my back those last couple of years. Like, I could still play, but when I finished 4th place at Rochester, I started that tournament knowing I couldn't win. And I had never felt that way before. Like, like I finished 4th was super respectable, like, because I could throw thumbers and sidearms. But it's like, I knew I couldn't beat Ken Climo when I was healthy. I wasn't going to beat him. And then actually that's where Ron won. So,
and that's actually one of the times where I really remember Barry like really turning it on as well, and hitting some holes. I know he was right there in that hunt too. And that was when, for me personally, I was like, holy shit, he's one of those guys. He's not just another dude that's going to win some tournaments here and there. He's a contender.
He's positioned. Yeah, he's positioned to. Yeah, I mean,
Course,
what?
That Chile course seemed to, if you were healthy, that was kind of like your Round Rock in a way.
Yeah, and actually I was in 5th place. 4 people made the finals, and I was in 5th place, 6 strokes out of 4th place, going into that semifinal round. And I still remember I shot 11 under in the pouring rain, which is still the course record today. Still the course record. And I did it in the pouring rain to pass Al Shack by a stroke to make. So that was almost like one of my last hurrahs, because it came together and I got to make the finals, which was always a treat. But yeah, no, the 2 second places I got, it was 9.5 rounds of golf back then. I lost by 7. I believe I lost by 7 and lost by 4.
That's right.
So I kept getting closer and closer, but that's as close as I could get. And again, I can't stress this enough. That when I lost Worlds by 4 strokes, there's still that part of me that says, if I had shot just 5 strokes better, I still would have lost by 4. Because it just always felt like this, like, he had my number, and I mean, hats off to him. Nothing but respect for the game of disc golf that he played. I mean, he was unstoppable.
Everybody likes to put the argument in terms of like the GOAT, the greatest of all time. If we just take Climo, and the field he played, and I know you've talked a lot about this, you've answered a lot of questions about this. There were really great players, and it's a shame that a lot of people overlook how many great players there were in the '90s and '80s and even the early 2000s. But when you're that good, when you're that heads and shoulders above the crowd, it doesn't matter how they would have stacked up now. The '90s belong to Ken. Whether we just say, where does that relate in the whole greatest of all time status? It doesn't even matter. Let's look at the decades, or break it down into smaller chunks.
Comparing eras is like, it's great for talk shows. It's great for bar stools.
Right.
There's no way to compare it. I mean, Babe Ruth was so far heads and shoulders above the competition but could have a fat drunk competed in a modern game? I don't know. Right? Like, it's like, but, or either that, or he was so far heads and above that if he played in the modern game and was being paid millions of dollars, he might have not drank during the season and been in really damn good shape and probably doing roids. And he might have been Barry Bonds, and so he might have been a significantly better version of himself because he was playing in a different era. There's no way to compare, and I don't think, like, at the end of the day, praising one doesn't take away from the other,
right?
And
so
it's like,
he was
so
playing
everybody
uniform too.
Everybody stands on their own merit, and Ken's merit was he was freaking Terminator. That's it. Like, he was like he was Terminator 1 who could turn himself into Terminator 2 when he needed to.
He had that extra gear that nobody even knew.
And so how that compares to the modern player is not even relevant. It's independent. It's kind of like, like if you compare how much money you made compared to a modern player, like that like how much money a modern player earns in disc golf compared to how much they used to has zero impact on how much you earn. Whether the modern player makes less money or they make millions of dollars, you still made $1,500 winning that tournament. It's like, it's irrelevant. They're completely independent.
Well, and for anyone like those of us, I know Mace is a huge hockey fan. We talk about before the expansion and then after the expansion. It's two different worlds. You've got the records there, you've got the world there, but the world's moved on. The technology's improved, the coaching has improved. Personal diets. Look, you're at 52, you're probably in better shape, or 53, sorry. You're probably in better shape than you've ever been in your life.
I'm in the most amazing shape of my life. Like, if like, I never had this type of commitment or discipline. So who knows what life would have been like. But yeah, I'm like, I don't mess around right now. Like, I am so dedicated to doing everything perfect because I have to, because the players are so damn good and there's so many of them. I mean, it's stupid.
Every time you turn around, there's a new person that's threatening.
Yeah.
Every time
they're all great. They're all deadly inside 40 feet. They all throw 600 feet. They all have sidearms. They're all accurate. None of them are scared of anything. I'll tell you, it's the strangest thing to me, actually, because I got a third place finish at the Euro Tour event in Croatia. I lost to Paul McBath, was the only player that, and Jakub Simrad, but we were tied with 3 holes to go. And when I was out at that tournament in Croatia, and this happens all the time, I just watch all these players play, and I cannot even imagine how I could possibly compete against them when I watch them. And then when I go out there and beat them, I'm just like, what? Like, how is that? Like, and I'm simply making more shots. I know for a fact, if you were watching me, like, I know for a fact tomorrow, like, if you watch the tournament, you watch me and Eagle McMahon and the other 2 players on the lead card. Like, if you didn't know anything, you would wonder what the hell I was doing there, because the eyeball test is, I don't look like them when I throw. They're just they're machines. Except I have a reasonable chance of beating them.
You never looked like anybody when you threw, though, dude. I mean, you have a hitch in your giddy up that I don't think anybody else has, and it's your cadence and your timing between your steps and everything. And so, I mean, that's not at all fair. But then I think they more likely would look at you and go, wait a minute, who's that old guy? Holy shit, he threw as far as those young guys, And I mean, granted,
I still throw a sidearm as far as anyone on the Pro Tour. Like, I can still get a hold of my sidearm 550 feet.
Nice.
And with no injuries. This is, by the way, if I could pitch my online Become a Complete Disc Golfer class available at ScottStokely.net, I still rip the disc. and I do it without pain or injury because I feel like I throw correctly. But it doesn't mean I
Sign up
look
right
good.
here.
I don't necessarily look as good doing it, or maybe I do. It's just, but when I look at them, I just go, like, I'm mesmerized by how good they all are. It's so smooth and they're so talented. And then I got a 5th place at the tournament in Skellefteå. I played the tournament in Skellefteå, and there were a bunch of Americans there, and it was like a super high. That's the home of Latitude 64, and it's the Latitude 64 home course, and I shot the course record the final round at that tournament. It only
Wow.
held for like 15 minutes, and then James Proctor came in and beat it. And I was watching him on the because I was on the second card, he was on the first card, and I saw him passing me. But I'm just like, how the hell do I go out? Like, I'm just it's weird. But I think I outwork everybody. I really do right now.
Well, listen, we have so much more that we could talk to you about, but it is approaching 4:00 your time. You do have to outwork some people starting tomorrow for this tournament you're in.
Okay.
And at some point, we're going to have to let you go. But we would ask you, please think about coming back and joining us for the second 2 parts of this huge interview that's kind of.
I would love to. I would love to, for sure.
Hey, so I asked you earlier about this in a PM, and you didn't really give me a direct answer. Are you going to waste that qualification to the USDGC or what?
Yeah, I'm not going.
Man.
Here's the thing about it, because people asked me about going to Masters Worlds last weekend also.
Right.
And it's like, the thing about now, and like, my goal is to win, and I want to win big tournaments. And I mean, I'm still trying to compete. I'm not out here just for show. I'm trying to win. But where I go has to do with like where my heart's at. And when I thought about going to Masters Worlds, my heart rate didn't speed up. And when I thought about going to PCS and the idea of trying to win a Euro Tour event where half of the best Americans in the world are at, my heart started racing. And it's like, that's where I had to go. And I ended up finishing 20th. I beat who's who of like world champions and 10, 30, 40 rated players. Like, I mean, I played 10, 30 something golf. Like, 20th place there was way harder than winning worlds, like, as far as what was required score wise, right? But it's just whatever just drives me. And when I think about the USDGC and I check my pulse, it's not really racing. But there's a couple tournaments, the championships, the Euro Tour championships in Spain, when I think about, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to go. It's a new experience. Yeah. The other thing is I'll just give one quick aside, is that my biggest passion right now in disc golf is growing disc golf in developing countries. I will be spending, I hopefully for the rest of my life, I will be spending half of my time in Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, trying to bring disc golf to these countries where I think where I could bring disc golf to. And
Wow.
So the idea of like, that's what's exciting to me. I'm hoping in October, as of right now, to go to Madagascar. If it's not this year, it'll be next year. But there's something going on in the Philippines. As of right now, I'm going to be in India this spring, meeting with a bunch of people. I'll be in Indonesia for sure in November, working on a disc golf project. So that's actually where my heart is. I don't have a trust fund, and I don't take donations. So I still got to go out and make a living promoting my disc golf stuff, which I will do for half the year, and I'll have a blast doing it. But then my heart's in like right now, my heart's in Indonesia. My heart's in the Philippines. I want to bring disc golf to not the I'm not interested in, I'm not trying to set up disc golf course for tourists or expats who live there. I want to bring disc golf to places where people have nothing. That is what I want to do with the rest of my life. So USDGC is exciting, but there's things that are far more exciting to me. So, right. By the way, my invitation to USDGC that I earned, like, that is, I am so proud of that. Like that's a trophy for me, because that means I'm still not, I wasn't invited there because I have a big social media following or because I used to be good. It's like I earned my spot there, just like Paul and Ricky.
Right.
So I'll take the invitation as my trophy.
All right, that's a good way of looking at it. It'd be
Well,
nice to see you there for sure, because it is the 25th. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, it just doesn't move me. And if it did, I would go. But Indonesia's moving me.
Well, hopefully
on.
we can catch up with you maybe over the winter, and we can catch up where you are in the world. And the following two segments of this interview, we want to talk about your experiments, your successes, your leadership, the failures that you've learned from those, let's call them learning opportunities. And then, it's a great way to get into just the global aspects of how you've developed the game into a worldwide phenomenon. But until then,
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Love you
Scott.
both.
You bet, Scott. Appreciate you
buddy.
staying up late to hang out with us.
Thank you.
No
you're
problem.
A real trooper.
I love both you guys, and we will see you again. Thanks.
All right, brother.
Everybody.
Bye.
All right, that was awesome. That was long.
That was long, and
2.5 hours.
we still only got a third of the way through it.
A third of the way. I cannot thank him enough for staying up. It's 4 o'clock his time.
That's something else, man.
It's crazy.
He picked it though.
He did pick it. So there we are. That was a wonderful adventure with Scott Stokely. Hopefully we've got some people who dropped in and learned a few new things, or a few old things, or maybe they weren't quite familiar with who Scott Stokely is, and they're a little more familiar now. I think he put it best. He was like, when somebody read his book, I think it was his Adriana, she said he was like the Forrest Gump of the disc golf world, and he has been at ground zero for an amazing array of incredible historical events in the sport. So we can't thank him enough for giving us all that time to.
It's pretty interesting what he said after he said that, though, too. He said, well, I was there for all that stuff, but so was everybody else. And I kind of got that same feeling whenever when I was looking at the information before we interviewed Kevin McCoy, a few months back, where for me personally, so many of my favorite times and memories that I experienced, Kevin was there for, and I've been lucky like Scott, and so have you to some degree as well, but I've been at a lot of these cool things because that's what we were all doing at the time, you know what I mean? When, like, I was there when he took second both times, and one of them I remember real vividly. It not because of their play or anything like that, but just being at Erkenbreckers for that final in Cincinnati in '98, just there's some of those times where you look back and, like same thing for us in '95 in Cincinnati. I mean, we look back at that event and people talk about it and we're like, oh yeah, well, still to this day, that was still one of my all-time favorite tournament experiences was '95 Am Worlds. And there's a lot of these people that we're interviewing that don't have that experience because, well, they were better than us. Or they got out.
Scott is like that typical kind of early '80s golfer who he went from junior boys to pro. There's no working your way up Am4, Am3, Am2, Am1, eventually jumping out of the nest. He was splat, throw the spaghetti at the wall.
Well, it's also quite possible that at that point in time they didn't have Am2, Am1, that they just had it was more of an age protected thing. Like it was everybody that was under 16 and then everybody else was in the open division,
Yeah. All right. So let's we're gonna reconvene on Wednesday with Levon Wolf.
Correct.
So whoever's out there still with us, thank you for joining us. It's a wonderful show with Scott Stokely, and we look forward to doing it all again in the week.
Man, we had a ton of people stop by too. I'm going to read a few people off before we go. John McDaniel, he's been regular. Mitch Justice tuned in. Mike Dussault, Chad Lefevre, Barry Schultz,
Oh,
Jeff Ron Noel, Barry Allen, one of my local buddies, Jeff Davis, old friend of both of ours.
Jefferson.
Yeah, he's got his own county out in West Texas. None of us knew it, until I went out to Phoenix last year. Anyways, Bill Tesh, Carl Visser,
Wow.
Stephen Lottie, Dale Himmeline, John Finch. That's the little John Finch. Jesse Santiago, Jason Smith, who's a friend of mine. I'll be working with in Florida in 2 weeks. Ryan Estes, Robert Thompson, Dennis Integer, Scott Roberts, Anthony Miller, Ray McCullum is another buddy of mine from the entertainment business. Greg Brooks, Mike Ponzak, another friend of mine from the entertainment business, and Brad Bishop, Jim Oates. I thought that was Tim, but Jim's brother, Kim Birdie, and Chris Ellis. So that's a pretty good. Again, we're getting. We're not getting monster numbers at any given point, but we're getting 30 or 40 people for each show, and views on the YouTube page are pretty strong. Uncle Cud, Joe Rotan, still in the lead with the most views on his show. So we'll see how many Scott's people jump on board and watch this after the fact too. So anyways, that was a great day.
It was a great day. Great chat with Scott. Hopefully he's gonna go from here, have an awesome sleep, and then just carry that positive energy forward on the course tomorrow.
Who was
Or
in first? Eagle?
today. No, he's tied with the Eagle. I can't remember who he said was first. It's a good question.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Where is he right now?
Oh, look at that first page. Let's see. It's Alland Open, ALAND
right.
Open.
That's right.
Look at us, technology buffs.
Alland Open. Let's see what they have to say. This is their website. Okay. Do they have any updates? Maybe not.
Is it not on the PDJ.com?
Okay. Oh, who is this? Hjalte Jensen, 2007 rated player.
Nice.
So the lead card from the Holland Open is Hjalte, Stokely, and Eagle. They both shot 54s, which is -9. And then Miro Rihanen is also tied at 54. So they're a stroke behind. So hopefully we didn't keep Scott up too late. Hopefully he's got some juice to move forward. One of the things that we didn't get to ask him, but maybe we can ask later, is how does it feel to be one of the few 4-digit numbers competing in all these tournaments? Now, in Europe, it's a little bit different because they did reserve some selections of numbers in the 4 digits for European players.
Well, so wouldn't that be like the 8,000 numbers, or were they in those 8,000s as well?
I think there were some 6,000s as well, but Niels Iso Marku is 84.34. He's currently sitting in 46th. Just looking through here, that's like some of the few 4-digit numbers.
That's crazy.
Andreas Walls, 84.99. So again, in the 8,000s. Those might be the only two in this stacked field. I mean, there's very few 5-digit numbers at this tournament that he's playing.
Yeah, because all of that growth in Finland has been recent. That's not old school growth. So, I bet they probably...
There are 3 4-digit PDGA numbers in 122 of the Open division.
Interesting. That's pretty crazy.
So our hearts go out to Scott, and definitely we wish him the best. And there's no way of putting this delicately, but I meant it when I said it. He was my hero in the 90s because he was the one that seemed most human. He was, I mean, Stokely won everything and his form was impeccable and he never made a mistake. How are you supposed to really Kleinwood did, sorry. But Stokely, he was the freak of nature. He had the huge character. He had the sartorial choices. He was the one who dyed his hair blue. You know what I mean?
He definitely was not on the same path as everybody else for a lot of his life, self-admitted too. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things where, like, I don't know, I guess we gotta, at some point we're gonna have to admit that we can't pull this off in an hour too, because I mean, we just did 2.5 hours with him, and we bailed for a half an hour. So, but that's not in the 2.5 hours, I mean. So we talked with him for about 15 minutes after we finally found him, and then we talked for another 2.5 hours. I mean, it's probably realistic.
Probably realistic.
It's probably unrealistic to expect people to stick with us that whole time, but they can come back and chop it up however they want.
And we'll eventually figure out our shit, and we'll put up edited videos up online so you can see it easier.
No, we're not. We're already editing them as much as we're gonna.
That's the goal, at least.
We can go. We can maybe. I might go back in there and take out the piss break, but other than that, I'm chopping off the front end, and that's it.
We're definitely taking out the piss break. Come on. But let's take this offline. I need to powder my nose, and in the meantime,
thanks for tuning in, everybody. Really appreciate it. We got Levon Wolf on Wednesday. We're taking a break the week after, and then we're doubling up 2 weeks in a row. So stay tuned. Look forward to seeing you.
August has got lots on demand, so get you some.
All right, have a good one, y'all.
I hope so. I hope so.